that, but yeah, they're good offensively.
Bottom 3 in defense.
You're so bad. Remember that very first game where Westbrook made them actually defend, and it was like, man, maybe he's gonna make a difference.
Yep. And then they lost.
Yeah, and they kept losing.
Can't help but wonder the worse Houston gets, where they play faster.
Yeah. Well, I mean, especially because they're not playing big. I mean, they're playing bigger than last year, but they're not playing like Cousins plus one.
Right. They don't have a 6'2" center.
Right. That's now the Charlotte Hornets.
Jordan, we got the totals up too? My man. 240 and a half in Brooklyn.
Yeah, that game's a lock to be like 85 to 80.
Yeah. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Awesemo.com NBA Deeper Dive. Glad to be with you once again to start off the week. It's Martin Luther King Day as well. So wonderful day to be talking some basketball. I'm Dave Loughran at Laffy_D on Twitter, LOUGHY_D. And joining me as he always does, Adam Scherer at ShipMyMoney DFS. Adam, it's weird because usually on Martin Luther King Day, you have some of those monster 11-game slates that start at 2 p.m. They go all the way up through 10 p.m. lock or 10 p.m. tip-off, and you're watching basketball with the same lineup for like 12 straight hours. But not the case today. Split up. We had a weird Miami game that got pushed to 8, another postponement. It's basketball in the world of COVID.
Yeah, I was kind of disappointed when I looked last night and saw that we didn't get that kind of like Christmas Day-esque slate, partly because it's really fun and partly because I thought I was going to get out of having to write the deep dive with the game starting early, but didn't end up being the case. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of nice. You know, you got the 2, maybe 3-game early slate, and then we have for a 4-game slate, this is actually a pretty good one, I think.
I think so too. A couple really fast-paced games with high totals, one of them eclipsing 240. We'll get to that to start this show off. But yeah, ultimately, there's just for 4 games, there's a lot more that you could find a lot worse spots. And Adam mentioned the deep dive. He did, in fact, have to write that. If you want to check it out, it's entirely free all season long. I would highly recommend you check it out every day at Awesemo.com. It's free. You'll see it right on the homepage when you get there, AWESEMO.com. See it, deeper dive. It comes out, what does it come out, like 3:34 every day because it takes so long to write?
Yeah, it depends on the slate size. And like today it didn't come out till like 4 today because I was distracted by the early slate. But yeah, I try and get it out between 2 and 3, which normally means it comes out at like 3:30.
And we're happy to have all you guys with us as always. Hit that thumbs up. It helps us greatly. It's the easiest way to help support us, and it's entirely free. But even more importantly than that, subscribe to the channel. We're about 1,300 away from 50K. It's a goal we've really tried to achieve to get there by the Super Bowl, which is in early February. And thanks to all of your support, I think we're going to do it. But if you watch the show or you're brand new to the channel, you like what we do here, you like the free content, you think along the way, maybe we helped you out, hit that subscribe button, join the community. You'll always know when we're live. We'll always show up in the recommended, the browse feature. It's the best way to help beat that algorithm here on YouTube. Let's jump into it. And first off, Dylan with the super chat, thank you. He said, won $2,000 thanks to all the tools at Awesemo during NFL Showdown yesterday. Put me on the Iverson jersey, Laffy. You got it, fella. You're going up there. We appreciate the support and congratulations. All right, let's start it off with Milwaukee and Brooklyn. We got an hour to cover these games. I think maybe we'll make it. Milwaukee on the road, favored 4.5 points, or 4 points, 240.5 point total. No real news here. Once we get to Brooklyn, Irving's out, and we'll dive into that a lot more. I think there's a ton to talk about there. But with Milwaukee, there's just not that much. They do a lot of the same stuff. Middleton plays like 75% of his minutes alongside Giannis, so you get a little staggered, but maybe not as much as I'd like at 8K. Where do you start off with Giannis and the big 2, maybe the big 3, if you want to lump Jrue Holiday into that mix?
I don't, but
okay.
So I think the first thing here is, obviously you and I talk a lot about not downgrading players too much because of the risk of blowout, especially if they're on the team that's likely to win. But it's always something that comes up in these Milwaukee games because Milwaukee just blows out so many teams. And as a result, you're seeing Chris Middleton this year has averaged a little over 32 minutes per game. Giannis has averaged a little over 31 minutes per game. It's hard to really count on any one game this season staying competitive since we've had so many blowouts, but I assume this game's going to be competitive against a good Brooklyn team that has Harden, that has Durant. Should be a really fast-paced game. So I think that both Giannis and Middleton just give you a little bit higher upside than they normally get because they can play really well, and Brooklyn can still very easily hang in this game. And we've seen in competitive games that you get 35, 36 minutes from Giannis. Middleton plays mid-30s as well. Giannis's rates are down across the board this year from last year, but you're talking about someone last year that averaged over 1.8 fantasy points per minute. So him being down to 1.6 to 1.65 is still one of the best fantasy producers in the league with the potential to play more minutes tonight. Middleton's at 1.25 fantasy points per minute, and he's a small forward, which is a pretty difficult position to fill. So I think Giannis and Middleton both stand out as really good plays. I think they're better tonight than they are on most slates, just because normally you do have a more legitimate blowout risk. And typically you don't have games with 240 plus totals either. So those two really, really stand out to me.
What about Brook Lopez? It's not exactly an inspiring season, but he has averaged 32 minutes per game over his last 5, which is a lot more than he was seeing earlier in the season to kick it off. That's good minutes for Brook Lopez, or really any center starting for Milwaukee. We haven't seen that in quite some time. And while his production hasn't been stellar, Adam, it has been a little bit better. He's gone 30 plus DraftKings points in 3 of his last 5. And DeAndre Jordan is a big center, a quality rebounder, and a good shot blocker. But when you look at Brook Lopez's style of play, something you and I have discussed for a while now, if this is the type of matchup that potentially could pull DeAndre Jordan away, but more so make it more difficult for DeAndre Jordan to defend those 3-point shots if they even ask him to in spot-up situations for Brook Lopez. I don't imagine that would be the case. Maybe this is a decent spot for him against a traditional center in DeAndre Jordan that is more a stay-at-home type in the paint.
Yeah, and I think it is too, because not only, the defensive assignment there, but Lopez isn't someone that relies on rebounds to get his fantasy production, which on one hand is a bad thing. When you're talking about a center that doesn't rebound, it makes him more scoring dependent than most centers. It gives him typically a little bit lower ceiling than most centers. But on the other hand, when you think about what DeAndre Jordan is going to take away from a center playing against him, he's taking away your baskets at the rim potentially, and he's taking away rebounds. Brook Lopez doesn't rely on any of that anyway. So you're still getting some block upside from Lopez, and you're still getting probably open 3-pointers here. The thing that concerns me with Lopez, and the other positive for Lopez, is he's definitely someone that is very dependent on game flow. Like, he sees his minutes limited, just like Giannis, just like Middleton, in blowouts, but he's normally even riskier than them because he's the 4th option offensively. So a lot of times you get Lopez getting limited minutes and not even really being involved in the reason the game blew out. But in competitive games, you're typically getting those 30 plus minutes. So I think that all looks really good. The thing that is an issue for me is that he's up to 5,600 on DraftKings. And, with it being a 4-game slate, the center position, not quite as much opportunity cost as on some other slates, but there are still plenty of good options, especially, DraftKings, where you can roster 2 centers. You have Giannis, you have Durant as center eligible, Woods only center eligible. So the position's still deep, even for a 4-game slate. And I think Lopez is priced pretty much where he should be. So it's more of a tournament play if we do get low ownership on him than anything that I actually feel confident in.
Yeah, look, I don't disagree, but I do think he's a quality tournament option for a couple of reasons. One, his ownership right now is coming in around 8%. 2, the game has the highest total on the slate by a wide margin. 240.5, even in 2021, is really significant. And 3, you look since the start of January, he's averaging around 11 rebound chances per game. For a center, a typical center, that's not great. For him, it's good enough to where if he gives you 7 or so, you're feeling pretty good just given his ability to score. And the last thing, everyone looks at, I think there's this misconception that he can't play defense, and that because he doesn't rebound, he can't do anything on the defensive end. He's a good shot blocker. He had a 6.5% shot block rate 2 years ago. 7.9 last year. It's at 5.3 this year. I assume it's only going to come up a little bit. So no disagreements with you in that he's a tournament play and nothing more. but Brook Lopez will have those games sometimes where he gives you, like, for example, against Detroit on the 13th, he had 11 rebounds and 4 blocks, only 9 points because, he only got up 8 shots. But I do think there is a decent ceiling with Brook Lopez. It's just not a guy that you want a ton of. You won't need to at only 8% though.
Yeah, and to your point, he has at least 8 rebounds in 3 of his last 4 games.
Yeah,
and also like I agree completely with what you're saying. Like there's this the misconception that like he can't rebound or he doesn't play defense. He is a good rim protector, like you said. He also boxes out really well. That's why you've seen on teams that he was previously on, the guards typically you get guys like Josh Hart that rebound really well, so some other guards, because Lopez doesn't personally grab it, but he's the reason that his team gets it. It's frustrating for fantasy, but what that can translate to is, like you were saying, over these recent games, he's creating the rebound chance for his team. If he actually just goes and grabs the ball, like that's the only thing separating him from fantasy points.
For sure. Do you have anything else for Milwaukee?
I mentioned, I joked at the beginning that I wasn't putting Drew Holiday in the same category as Middleton and Giannis because I think he's priced a little bit too closely to Middleton, and he's also at a premium position at point guard, whereas Middleton's a small forward. But that's not to say that, I'm not interested in Middleton here. It is just a really appealing game. There are only 4 games on the slate, and I don't think he's really overpriced. It's just that he's clearly the third option offensively behind Middleton and Giannis. He's also third on the team in assist percentage behind Middleton and Giannis. So he's a really good player. He certainly can give you a good game. It's just hard to count on it. So, again, more of a tournament option for me. And then I will point out the price tag on Dante DiVincenzo on FanDuel. He's only 4,400. If this game's competitive, you probably see, 27, 28 minutes from DiVincenzo. He's averaged around 0.9 fantasy points per minute, and, 4,400 in a game that should have a ton of possessions is pretty appealing.
All right. Flip to the other side of this one. The Brooklyn Nets, 4-point dogs, but they do have a 118.25 implied total, 122.25 for the Bucks as well. So again, really high scoring environment here. 2 teams that are going to play at a fast pace, and I would assume we're going to see a lot of points, no doubt about it. Brooklyn playing at the 5th fastest pace in the league. The Bucks at the 8th fastest pace. Both of them averaging north of 102 possessions per 48. So in that, the first and only game that Harden played with the Nets. First of all, it's amazing to see those pictures of him in Brooklyn and in Houston. Really looked like he was wearing a fat suit. But the usage from Kevin Durant and James Harden was absurd. 37.5% usage from Harden, 36.6 for Kevin Durant, and then third highest on the team was Joe Harris at 14.8. So just a massive, massive drop-off in usage between these 2 guys and the next closest player, which should be expected. And then another important aspect of this pairing to point out, because Kyrie Irving, conditioning purposes, you'd think he was hurt or something, is not going to play. KD and Harden played 31 minutes together. Harden played 39 minutes. Durant played 40. So that's they're not really getting staggered a lot, but still probably would expect anywhere between 8 and 10 minutes not together from game to game, at least tonight before Kyrie Irving returns.
Yeah, well, they're getting staggered 100%. It's just that they each only sat for 8 minutes. So
right. Well, you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, but the only distinction there is like if instead of playing 40 minutes, if Harden were to play 36, you're getting 12 minutes for Durant, like without Harden on the floor. So the rotation was good from that sense. It's just that they both played 40 minutes. So there's only so much. But, it kind of went.
I'm just expecting them to play around the same minutes today against Milwaukee in what should be a really competitive game.
Yeah, agreed. And I think that, even it's difficult to predict exactly how this offense is going to look, but it's a lot easier as long as Kyrie's out because, we have a lot of situations throughout the NBA where you have 2 stars. It's just that third one, especially being a ball dominant guy, that's going to make it tough. But here, I think that that game against Orlando played out pretty much as expected. You saw Harden and Durant dominate usage. They dominated the assist opportunities as well. Harden had 18 potential assists. Durant had 10. DeAndre Jordan was actually next with 7 in only 23 minutes. As far as the quote unquote ball handlers, Bruce Brown, 3 potential assists in his 23.5 minutes, was 4th on this team behind Harden, Durant, and Jordan. So you saw Durant and Jordan, or Durant and Harden rather, doing everything from scoring, getting assists. So it's pretty much a 2-man show there from a DFS standpoint. Like you're still going to get minutes from Joe Harris, but he's not going to do anything other than shoot. And it's not like he's going to shoot a lot playing alongside these guys. Jeff Green closed the last game and played almost 30 minutes, but he's not going to do a whole lot offensively playing with these guys. Like he'll get some rebounds, but that's about it. So it's really, really tough for me to like much here outside of Harden and Durant, who I love.
All right. So for me, the biggest question is not whether I want to play Harden and Durant. It's a pretty simple answer. I already saw the conversation in chat about both of them aren't going to get there again. Both of them can't get there. That's just not true. Like, if both of them are playing, look, are we always going to project minutes perfectly? No. And like you said, if let's say 35 minutes for each of them, then you're getting more more staggered minutes where there's a lot less overlap. But at the same time, I don't anticipate that being the case. If you got that many minutes in the first game against Orlando, now you've got a home matchup with Harden and Durant on the floor against the Milwaukee Bucks. If this game is competitive, these guys are going to be out there for another 38 to 40 minutes, and I feel pretty good about that. So, any two players that are literally erasing the rest of the team from fantasy relevance, that means that they're just going to be a black hole in a good way, sucking everything away from the rest of the team and consuming it themselves. I'm on board. The big question I have is more so with DeAndre Jordan, because our ownership projections actually have him higher than I expected. He's around 23% right now since our last update. I can update again just to make sure. I probably did update again. Hold on here. 3 minutes ago, as a matter of fact. And DeAndre Jordan has come down, it appears. He is down at, around 16%, but only 23 minutes last game. You saw some for Perry. You saw some for Jeff Green closing the game out. I don't have a ton of confidence that DeAndre Jordan's minutes are there, which means if I'm rostering him, I'm hoping that in 23 to 25 minutes, he can get the job done at a price point that has come up since the big blockbuster trade last week.
Yeah, I'm kind of torn on what to do here because the upside is clearly still there. Like if you look at the rotation, like we know that he was playing 28 to 30 minutes prior to last game. And then last game, Jeff Green closed over him. But other than that, the rotation was pretty much the same. You got 9 minutes in the first quarter from Jordan. You got 4.5 minutes in the second. So it was on pace for another like 27, 28 minutes. He just didn't play in the fourth quarter. And so on one hand, you look at that and you're like, well, that was going up against a center in Vooch where, you would expect Jordan to be on the floor. But on the other hand, Vooch is someone averaging over 5 3-point attempts per game, and he's going to pull DeAndre Jordan away from the basket. So I think it makes sense that you saw Jeff Green out there. Brook Lopez, same type of guy that's going to pull Jordan away from the basket. But the difference here, I think, is that the Bucks have Giannis. And so you can put someone else on Lopez, to hang out at the 3-point line. You can have Jordan protect the rim against Giannis. Like Giannis, if he wants to shoot threes, you're going to let him. So I think that, not saying Jordan definitely does close tonight, but I think that there is still a decent chance that he does. And if he does, he's underpriced because you're getting, in that case, 28 to 30 minutes of probably 1 to 1.1 fantasy points per minute from Jordan. So I think the range of minutes is pretty wide for him. You could easily see another 23 or 24, but I also think 30 is in the range of outcomes.
Smokey Bear, thank you for the super chat, brother. He says, thanks for everything you guys do. I watch the show every day, and I'm up over $1,000 this season. Always a great show, no matter who is on. Let's keep it rolling. Well, that's great to hear. It's better with us on, but it is a good show. No matter
Josh
who.
Is whatever, but
yeah, exactly. Thanks, man. We appreciate you. All right, let's talk about, just to close this one out, there's won't be a lot here, the rest of Brooklyn. Like for me, honestly, man, I dug and tried to maybe come up with something, but it's like it's an exercise in futility, really.
Yeah, it's one of those. I hate talking about spots like this because there's guys that are going to have opportunities. Like other people are going to play 30 minutes, like Joe Harris, potentially Jeff Green if Jordan doesn't close. But I don't want to just sit here and say like, oh yeah, it's a fast-paced game, and if they play 30 minutes and they shoot well and they rebound well, they'll probably have a good fantasy game. Like, yeah, obviously, but there's nothing that, playing alongside Harden, playing alongside Durant, there's nothing that points to Joe Harris getting up a ton of shots or, getting a ton of rebounds or anything like that. So, it's Harden, it's Durant, and then, Jordan, I think, is risky, but still cheap enough that there's some value there.
All right. Let's talk about Dallas and Toronto. Luka Doncic coming off a monster game, 36, 16, 15, 2 steals, 87.5 DraftKings points. You DM'd us yesterday saying he might be tracking 100, which he was, and then that game got out of control. Adam, he had, first of all, just to set the table, they're 5-point dogs against Toronto, 221 total. We'll get to the Toronto injuries in a moment, but he was tracking 100. He had almost 90 DraftKings points, and they lost by almost 20.
Yeah, pretty impressive there. To still lose that game that badly when you have Luka going for 36 points, 16 boards, and 15 assists. But now you get actually a decent matchup against Toronto. Toronto's been in the middle of the league in pace this year. They've been in the bottom third of the league in defensive rating. You do have one of the lowest or the lowest implied total on the slate for Dallas, but still decent at 108. And you know that a huge portion of that is coming from Luka, as long as Dallas hangs in this game. Not concerned about Porzingis being back. I know I've mentioned it before, but in the games that Doncic played with Porzingis last year, he actually averaged more fantasy points per minute than in the games that he played without him. So I'm not concerned there. And, and we saw Porzingis play 33 and a half minutes yesterday. So maybe, he can get another 33 minutes here and kind of help open things up for Luka. So I really like Luka. I'll be interested to see, kind of how ownership shakes out because there's not a ton of value on this slate, or at least value you feel good about. So I think it's going to be tough to get two like stars and scrubby, and you're going to have to make decisions between, Luka, Durant, Harden, and Giannis. Right now, ownership is pretty bunched together on all of them. So if that's the case, I would say that I'll basically be using as a tiebreaker, where I have Toronto guys go to Luka, where I have Brooklyn guys go to Giannis, etc.
All right. Hey, by the way, our boy Emac in the chat posting his annual Fred Van Elite tournament, but he's got the building blocks article. That's also free. Check that out. He gets it. I don't know if that comes out the night before or very early in the morning, but it is a great way to start your day off looking at content. I remember when I first found DFS, I remember going to class, Adam, like 8 a.m. and just searching for content, and there was nothing out there. It was the Fade Basketball, which is the first place that ever gave me a job. They would come out with something around noon, and that was it. There was nothing else. Now you can go to Awesemo and get content at like 4 a.m.
Yeah, just be sure after you read his article to click on the deep dive, because I can't have Emac talking shit to me about page views.
Yes, that's true. Both of them. Except the thing is, his article comes out so long before yours that you can't really compare the two. It's not on even levels.
Yeah, well, I still don't like it.
Check them all out, though. Just real quickly with the Doncic thing, because you brought up a good point that really needs to stick here. Like when you're looking at the top priced guys, you look at our ownership tool, you can filter everything by salary. Doncic, 11,000 on DraftKings, 20%. Harden, $200 cheaper, about 1.5% less ownership projected. Giannis, 10.4, almost identical, and the same, a couple higher than Doncic. And then Kevin Durant is cheaper than all of them, but still north of 10,000, and he's pulling around 18% ownership as well. So even LeBron James is coming in that same grouping. So you have Doncic, Harden, Antetokounmpo, Durant, and James, all within, $1,000, $1,300 of each other. I'm only saying that because James is 9,700, and all of them are within 4% projected ownership. That's insane for a slate with this many top tier players.
Yeah, and so what I will say about that grouping in general,
and I know it's only 4 games, so it's a little bit less insane than if it was 10. But
what I will say about that grouping in general, if I were like max entering or playing a lot of lineups, which I'm not, I'm just playing 3 max tonight. But I do think, and again, obviously I haven't made these lineups, but I think that I can say with relative confidence, LeBron, if the ownership holds where it is, would be the one that I'm kind of like kicking out so that I can just get more of Luka, Harden, Giannis, and Durant. And the reason being the minutes. Durant and Harden, obviously we're expecting a ton of minutes. Luka, we're expecting a ton of minutes. And Giannis, we know, is getting like 36 if that game's competitive. LeBron's game has a ton of blowout potential, and he's averaging, like 32 minutes per game this year. So if the ownership holds where it is, I would rather be getting to the other 4 stars over LeBron if I can.
Okay. Who would you say your favorite 2 are right now?
Giannis and Luka. The tiebreaker there is really that Harden and Durant are playing with each other, and who knows who's going to have the bigger game. Giannis, I think Giannis is my favorite just because he's either comparably priced or on DraftKings actually cheaper than Harden and Doncic. And the only thing keeping his price tag where it is the number of blowouts that he's involved in. So assuming this game's competitive, he's very clearly underpriced.
So back to Dallas, they're without Josh Richardson, Dorian Finney-Smith, Maxi Kleber, Dwight Powell, all of them sidelined. Meanwhile, Tim Hardaway Jr. is still questionable to play with that groin injury. So that game also tips off at 7:30 Eastern. Hopefully we'll get some news on that prior to tip because he's going to play, huge minutes if he's active and this game stays close. But what about Kristaps Porzingis? Got his first 30-plus minute game of the season last time out, played 33 minutes. He has not been shy getting to the rim and more importantly, with the ball in his hands, actually shooting. He has not gotten to the line a lot, only 4 free throws in all 3 games combined. But he's attempted 16, 19, and 19 shots. And that's for a guy that hasn't played a ton of minutes. So I know he's expensive. I know it's super tough to get to someone like this on a day where all of these guys above 10K are around 20% ownership. But he's still pulling, he's pulling only 3% right now. Is there any merit to saying, you know what, maybe his minutes continue to ramp up. He plays 35. This game stays close. And we've seen huge Porzingis games in the past, and literally no one's going to be on him today. Or is it just not worthwhile to you?
Yeah, so there's kind of 2 things there. For one, on FanDuel, he's only 6,900. So much, much easier to get to there. I think a really good play on FanDuel. On DraftKings, I think it'll come down to your roster construction. I kind of mentioned earlier that there is value on this slate, but not nearly as much as we've had on a lot of other slates. If you were to go with like a more balanced build, obviously that's really risky when you have all these stars on the slate in a really good spot. But Porzingis is the type of guy that at 8,200, he can go get you 50 plus fantasy points and be a guy that really helps that kind of build. Is it the most likely outcome? Like, definitely not. But he's the kind of guy where if you are sort of foregoing a stars and scrubs lineup, you'd like having in your lineup because he still gives you that star type upside once in a while. So I think, like, from that standpoint, at low ownership, there's some merit, but it's just, I think from a normal, like an optimal, for lack of a better word, roster construction, it's going to be really tough to get there because you're allocating money to these guys at the top. Definitely 1, maybe 2, if you can make it work. And it's just going to leave you not really being able to get to an $8,200 Porzingis, which is why he's projected for such low ownership.
Sure. Yeah. And, 32% usage rate through the 3 games he's played. And obviously it's going to be tough to get there. But the only reason I asked too is because the usage is going to be high. And if Hardaway sits, it's kind of like the poor man's Harden Durant pairing in Brooklyn, where who else there's no Seth Curry anymore, right? Richardson, maybe he could handle some of the load, but he's out. If Hardaway doesn't play, honestly, who else do you have that you can say, go get us some points?
Yeah, exactly. It's just going to be the Doncic and Porzingis show with Jalen Brunson and Trey Burke and James Johnson contributing, where they can.
Yeah, Trey Burke's the decent scorer at times, just such a fluky player. Anthony Davis, thank you for the super chat, $20 coming in hot. Says, my guys, quick question. Would you make a rule to limit 2 of the top studs, AD, Harden, KD, LeBron James, Doncic, ABC? So he's saying, would you make a rule to limit 2 of them? Adam, it would depend on how much value is on a slate for me.
Yeah, I mean, I think the salary cap's going to do that, but
right, exactly.
No, I wouldn't, because if I can somehow make a lineup with more than 2 of them, then I would love to do so. I don't think you're going to be able to.
Right, and if the other day, I'm pretty certain I did something similar where we had, everyone out from Miami with COVID. I remember playing 3 guys above 9K and
right, yeah. Yeah, it's just one of those, like, let the projections kind of work. Like, if I'm running lineups and I'm getting somehow like Giannis plus Harden plus Durant, there's no reason, and the rest of my lineup is actually functional, which it should be if I'm using projections. There's no reason that I'm going to say like, oh, I only want 2 of those guys.
And if you're hand building, sometimes it's really tempting to throw in 3 of those guys above 10K because they're all in really good spots. But if that means you're playing 4 players that might be getting 15 minutes apiece, otherwise, unless you just want to take on an insane amount of risk, it probably not the greatest idea. But
yeah, I mean, my general rule of thumb when I would hand build and I was trying to decide like how stars and scrubs to go was to just like try and figure out if I wanted every player in my lineup to be able to score at least 30 points.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's the exact same approach I take. And I want all of them to at least, unless it's a rare scenario where you have like a Boban who plays 20 minutes and can give you 40. I want to know that all of them can at least give me a certain amount of minutes to get me there, especially if I'm playing some of these low end wing players that need the minutes or else they're not going to get there at all.
Right. Yeah. There's always that temptation to be like, oh, well, this guy's 3K. He can 5X. And it's like, yeah, but 15 points still doesn't get you very far.
Exactly. It does nothing. Back in 2013, it actually wasn't terrible. Now you're losing. Anything else for Dallas? If not, we can talk Toronto.
Yeah, I think Jalen Brunson potentially here is a decent value. He's 4K. He didn't play yesterday. He was listed as questionable, didn't play because of COVID protocols. He's not on the injury report today. So I'm assuming he's back. If he is, then there's at least a potential for him to get minutes, especially if Hardaway Jr. misses. Like if Hardaway plays, then it's pretty tough to trust him, I think, because you're probably getting like 20, 22 minutes. But if Hardaway Jr. sits, I mean, you got like 32 minutes for Josh Green yesterday. You got 28 minutes for Burke. You got 30 for a Wundu. There's no shortage of minutes available for Jalen Brunson, especially if Hardaway's out.
Joe K, thank you, sir. Said thought there'd be an early slate live before lock and news got updates, but still did well due to Awesemo tools. Thanks, guys. That's what I want to hear, man. We didn't do a live before lock because we didn't want to move the time of the strategy show, which, you know, everyone has a routine. A lot of people know what time it comes on. They watch that. So we kept it at the same time, but we covered all of those games. If there's ever like a popular early slate and you don't see a live before lock, there's 100% chance that we're going to cover it on the early strategy show for anyone that's new to Awesemo. But appreciate you, Joe. What do you got for Toronto?
A lot of guys that look almost exactly the same. I don't know if you've looked at rates for the Toronto guys, but
when I have. That's why I didn't even lead you in with anything. I just asked what you were doing with them.
Yeah, like when I started writing the deep dive, I kind of like used a throwaway line that Siakam, Van Vliet, and Lowry were all similar. And then when I went to write their actual numbers, Van Vliet and Siakam are both averaging 1.1 fantasy points per minute. Their minutes per game are separated by 0.1 minutes. Lowry is like 0.4 minutes ahead of them, averaging 0.02 of a point less per minute. They're all functionally the same play. It's just a matter of who has the better game. Van Vliet
usage and Siakam, too, though. Siakam 24% usage, Van Vliet 23.5, Kyle Lowry 22.
Yeah, Lowry like 30% assist, Van Vliet a couple points lower. It's really just whoever's playing well that game, which sucks to say, but that's about it. So really, what it comes down to for me is just how they fit into my lineups. I think that it's a perfectly fine spot for them. I think that their salaries are good. Like they're not drastically underpriced, but they're not overpriced either, especially for their upside. So it's just, like Lowry's useful where I'm looking for, or where I need someone in his price range and I can't afford Van Vliet or Siakam, especially on FanDuel where Lowry's really cheap. Siakam gives you power forward, whereas the other two are guards. So it's really just a matter of fitting them into your lineup. I think they're all pretty much the same. The one guy that I think I'm most interested in at his price, I still think $7,100 for Chris Boucher on DraftKings is just too cheap. He's only averaged about 24 minutes per game this year, but he's averaging 29 minutes per game over his last 5. And with someone like Boucher, I think it's important. You don't want to just look at his recent games and say like, oh, he's playing 30 minutes a game now, because I think matchups are really important for him. And you have seen over those 5 games, it's coincided with some small front courts where they can use him. But this Dallas front court, I don't think should be an issue either. Like Willie Cauley-Stein is probably playing 30 minutes for Dallas. He's a traditional center in that he's going to hang out around the basket, but he only weighs like 240 pounds. He's not a high usage guy. He's not someone that should really be able to bully Boucher. And then, beyond that, you have, Boban probably plays like 10, 12 minutes, but it's not a team that has like a traditional high usage center playing a bunch of minutes. So I don't think Toronto should have trouble getting Boucher on the floor. I think that you get another, 28 to 30 minutes from him. And he's averaging almost 1.4 DraftKings points per minute this year. He has power forward eligibility. So I think that you get a really high ceiling from Boucher.
He was really the only guy I wanted to touch on if you didn't, but you did. So there you have it. He's just one of those high per minute guys that when you can get good numbers and good minutes from him, you take it. And he's played 30 plus minutes in 3 straight games. Maybe you mentioned this. I was trying to look something up. I might've missed it, but is it 2 games now that Baines has started and he's started the second half?
2, I think it's 2 for Baines. And I think they went, and this is just going from memory, I think Siakam started at center and then it was Len, Baines.
And how many games has Boucher started center in the second half?
2 or 3 in a row, at least 2.
I think it was 2 in a row. It might have been 3.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying, is that something that we should be accustomed to seeing with Nick Nurse, or is that just random and it just so happened to be a couple days in a row and they didn't like the way they were playing?
No, I think that it's by design. I don't know why he's not just starting games. I guess they just like him off the bench in the first half or whatever. But I'm almost positive it's been 3 games in a row, because 3 games ago was Portland, which was where I actually didn't like Boucher because of the size of Portland's front court. But then Nurkic got hurt in the first half. So then Boucher started the second half opposite Enes Kanter. And then you had Charlotte back-to-back games with, the Bismack Biyombo, PJ Washington pairing where Boucher could just go nuts. So I think that there's a good chance you see that again here, because like I was saying, Cauley-Stein is bigger than Boucher. He's got a couple inches on him and like 30 pounds, but he's just not the kind of center that's going to go in there and just like dominate Boucher, offensively. So I don't really see any reason why Boucher wouldn't be able to be out there with him.
Dallas playing a really slow pace this year, less than 100 possessions per 48, and their defense actually ranks top 5 in the league. But I don't necessarily know how much weight that holds when, they've got half of their players missing. So are there any top options for you from Toronto? I know we talked about Boucher just being too low owned right now, but would you say there's any top options on this 4-game slate?
I think Boucher is the closest. Like, he's at 7,100. I think he'll probably fit pretty nicely into some lineups. The other guys are more of like last guy in, not because I don't like them, talking about Siakam, Van Vliet, and Lowry, but more so because I'm prioritizing other plays. But if, I need, if I have 8K left for someone, they're going to look like some of the best guys still available.
All right. You want to move on to the next one?
Yeah.
Hit that thumbs up, guys. If you hopped in late, appreciate all of the support, and subscribe to the channel. If you're not part of the community yet, we're almost at 50K. You're going to help us get there. Otherwise, we just can't do it. We can't do it on our own. We can't grab bots like that guy from Live Before Lock on the NFL show yesterday and just start botting up our subscribe. I'm sure you could, but we don't want to do that. We want it to be organic. We want it to be real. We want to be proud of it. Houston and Chicago. This is a very, very fun game. Houston 2.5 point road favorites, 226 point total. No John Wall, no Daniel House, and Brown is questionable. But the big news really is no Wall. Harden's gone. Christian Wood's been a stud, and Victor Oladipo is expected to make his Rockets debut after being landed in that blockbuster trade with Cleveland and Indy and every team in the league. So I want to start with Oladipo. I know his price is a little bit lofty, but I think, let me put it to you this way, and then I'll turn this over. I think it's very important that we're not looking at Oladipo as the similar guy from last year where it's like, well, yeah, he could be limited because of the injuries. Players get injured. It happens. Some guys get injured multiple times in a season, 3 seasons, and then they never get injured again, seriously. If he's been playing as many minutes as he was in Indy, 37, 36, 36, 31, 37 over his last 5 games, I'm going to assume that coming into Houston, Silas is going to say, we got no John Wall. We're small favorites on the road. I'm going to run this guy for 35 plus minutes again. And if that's the case, I think Oladipo can absolutely smash in this spot against Chicago.
I really like Oladipo here. And that, those are words that come back to bite me pretty frequently. But
yep.
So the reasons are, for one, like you just said, there's, I guess, that kind of connotation around Oladipo about, because he had the major injury and then he really struggled last year, but he's averaging over 34 minutes a game this year with Indiana. So the minutes, like you said, I really don't think are an issue. He hasn't played in a week, but I assume that's not enough time for an NBA player to get out of shape unless you're Kyrie Irving. So, I'm not concerned about the minutes unless I hear something. But the other thing is that what?
Sorry, I missed what you said, and then it clicked like 5 seconds later.
With Oladipo last year, he only averaged about 0.93 DraftKings points per minute. And that's, without factoring in who's on or off the floor. He just really struggled last year in his first year back from the injury. This year, his baseline is 1.14 DraftKings points per minute. That's what he averaged with Indiana. Most of those minutes, actually all but 12, came with Malcolm Brogdon on the floor. Most of them had Domantas Sabonis as well. Now you're talking about playing tonight on this Houston team where you have Christian Wood, who's a high usage guy. You have Eric Gordon, who will do some ball handling, but typically is going to take a back seat to someone like Oladipo. when you look at last year, Oladipo played just shy of 200 minutes without Malcolm Brogdon on the floor. He averaged 1.12 DraftKings points per minute, which, yes, that's what he's averaging this year, but it's like 0.2 of a point per minute higher than what he was averaging as a whole last year. So I think that you can see, 1.2 to 1.25 potentially fantasy points per minute here, especially in a matchup against a Chicago team that's one of the fastest in the league, that's one of the worst defensively. Oladipo gives you small forward eligibility on DraftKings as well, which is really valuable. And his salary only came up. He was mid 6K to 7K when he was with Indiana playing with Brogdon and Sabonis. Now he's on Houston playing with Christian Wood and basically nobody, and he's only up to 7,500.
Couldn't have said it better myself. It's not a crazy price point whatsoever. If you're willing to pay, that same price point for John Wall, which everyone was willing to do, and that was when James Harden was on the floor, there's no reason not to consider Victor Oladipo at that mid 7K price point without James Harden. Let's talk about Eric Gordon, and we'll go to Christian Wood. Eric Gordon, it's one of the rare points in the season where he's healthy, so maybe we take advantage of it. You talk about Oladipo biting you in the ass all the time. I can't think of anybody that ends up being chalk and disappointing in the past few years more than Eric Gordon. But here we are having a similar conversation once again. He's $5,200. And, with Harden gone, with Wall out, you're going to get some opportunities from him. Will it be enough? And how much do you like him?
Moderate interest. Like he's getting ownership, which he should.
A lot. Second highest projected owned player on the slate right now.
Yeah, he's third now. We updated, but
okay.
It's the price point's fine. The thing with Oladipo is like the general rule of thumb over the last few years has been when Harden and whoever the point guard happens to be are in, you just can ignore Gordon. When one of them is out, Gordon is decent, and when both of them are out, you just play him because he's underpriced. He played one game last year with Russell Westbrook without James Harden, averaged 0.8 fantasy points per minute in that one game. He played 3 games the year before with Chris Paul without James Harden, 4 games, averaged 0.8 fantasy points per minute over those 4 games. I expect him to do something similar here. You factor in the matchup, probably get like around 0.9 fantasy points per minute on average with upside for a little bit more. But Oladipo being there, I think you will see Gordon take a backseat to Oladipo in terms of ball handling, in terms of scoring. And then Christian Wood, we know, is going to be a high usage guy. So Gordon will get more shots than he would when he was playing alongside, Wall and Harden, or probably even if it was, Wall instead of Oladipo maybe. But I think that he's still a kind of just like neutral play for me, where he's not going to be he's unlikely to be the number 1 assist guy on the team. He's unlikely to be top 2 in usage. It's just, can he knock down some shots and get there in 30 to 32 minutes?
Tyler Hero out for Miami. For any of you who were sitting on that news here for the 3 p.m. game that got pushed back to 8 p.m. So keep an eye on that. Don't keep an eye on it. Keep an eye on if the game plays. I don't know if it will, but okay. So we got Eric Gordon out of the way. We got Oladipo. Now it's time for Christian Wood. He's been an absolute stud this year. And ultimately the minutes that he's playing last game, I know you had no DeMarcus Cousins. He played 45, but prior to that, 35 minutes in competitive spots. You're just going to get a ton of playing time from Christian Wood, and his price is deservedly so, continuing to climb quite a bit, Adam. And now you've got him today against Chicago. Should be another high scoring affair. On the season, he's averaging what? How many? Hold on. I lost it, but he's averaging a lot of fantasy points per minute. If you haven't pulled it up. What's that?
1.3.
1.3. Yeah, 1.3 fantasy points per minute, going up against the Chicago front court that has some ability, some talent. And guys like Wendell Carter Jr. just hasn't materialized yet, and this guy might foul out by halftime anyway. What are your thoughts on a very expensive Christian Wood, but in a very good spot?
I think the spot's great. I think he's a great producer. Obviously 1.3 fantasy points per minute. Overall this year, he has a 27.6% usage rate. You're getting him obviously without Harden, without Wall. Oladipo will soak up some of that usage, but I would expect Wood to be the highest usage guy on the team. That said, there's two things that concern me here. For one, and this is, I believe, only the case on draft. Yeah, on FanDuel, Wood's a power forward. He's also almost 10K. But on DraftKings, he's a center. So it's harder just to get him in the lineups because you only have two spots you can put him in instead of three or four. So that'll be a concern. The other slight concern I have here is that the Rockets do have more bodies than they have had recently. And so you assume that DeMarcus Cousins, barring ejection or something, is going to play 14, 16, 18 minutes, like somewhere in there. The Rockets have been really hesitant to play them alongside each other. So do you still get these 38-minute Christian Wood games? Or now with Cousins back, do you go back to, he's averaging 33.8 minutes per game this year? Do you go back to that like 34 minutes for Wood, which would be a problem, at least to some extent, because he's priced basically to play 37, 38 minutes. So I don't really know the answer to that. My guess is that you probably get like 34, 35 minutes from Wood. You probably get Cousins playing a few minutes alongside him, but mostly backing him up. My point here just being that I don't think he's overpriced as far as what he can do. Like, he still can just go have a monster game, no question about it. I think that there's just a little bit more risk now that Houston's getting healthier in paying this elevated price tag, because if Steven Silas does look to not play Cousins alongside Wood, I have a hard time thinking Cousins plays less than 10 minutes in this game.
I have him at 34 minutes.
That's, I think, a very reasonable guess. That's where I'm at too.
Yeah. And all of your reasoning is spot on. Like, you're not just going to give Cousins no minutes. You're not going to give him a DNP-CD, and you're not going to give him 8 minutes. At least it seems unreasonable that you would. And what are they going to play? Like 5-6 minutes alongside each other?
Maybe. And that's the thing. Like,
they did 2 games ago, but
right. They did 2 games ago when they had 9 players healthy.
Exactly.
Like, they had no choice but to play.
Right.
Like, playing 5 or 6 minutes alongside each other in that game was an incredibly small number of minutes
9
alongside
players.
each other. It seems very clear that they don't want to do it. So I think there is legitimate risk that you get like 0 minutes and that it's 33-15 or something in favor of Wood, in which case he still can go off, but he's priced where you really would like that extra floor that comes with 38 minutes. And I really don't feel confident that it's there.
When you're looking at some of these other players, like Ben McLemore, I know was chalky the one day, and that's just because they had nobody, but we know who Ben McLemore is. He's not someone that's siphoning usage off from anybody. Jason Tate has a 15% usage rate this season. PJ Tucker, I could go down the list of players that could get minutes today and really aren't going to have a huge impact on guys like Gordon or Wood or Oladipo from a usage standpoint, from an overall playmaking standpoint, just getting touches when you're out there. So the real last question for Houston is there anybody else that we haven't talked about that's worth discussing?
I don't think so. I think it's Wood, Oladipo, Gordon. I guess you can mention Cousins if you're playing large field tournaments on a 4-game slate, because not that I think he's like a great play, but he is cheap. He is averaging 1.4 fantasy points per minute. All he needs is Christian Wood to get in foul trouble or something, like just something weird to happen. If DeMarcus Cousins gets from 15 or 16 minutes to even 20 or 21 minutes, he has the potential to win you a tournament. So it's not the kind of guy you're going to trust. But right now, Christian Wood's the highest owned player on the slate. And the guy that would benefit the most if the highest owned player on the slate doesn't play as many minutes as we think also happens to average 1.4 fantasy points per minute.
Also, Tim Hardaway will play. So
that knocks down Jalen Brunson.
Yeah, not the biggest news, but small impact there, and we're going to give you any news as we get it. Also, check out the news blog that our guy always updates, News God. You see him in chat often. You can get all of his updates. Hit him up on Twitter as well. While you're there, follow Adam at ShipMyMoney DFS, myself at Laffy_D, LOUGHY_D. Chicago side of the ball, man, chat's been popping off about Levine. Maybe it's just 2 people, and then it's a lot of other people telling those 2 people to shut up, because sometimes that happens too. But, you've got Zach Levine. You've got a guy that I've been a big fan of since he came into the league. Josh and I had a massive battle over this. He said he was terrible. He said he was the worst player. That's hyperbole, but he hated him. Kobe White. Kobe White's been pretty decent, though.
I thought you were saying he hated Levine.
What's up?
I thought you were saying he hated Levine.
No. He's not that insane. But there was a big thing about Kobe White. Just, I think Kobe White's a pretty decent player. Don't look at last game where he didn't make a single field goal. But from a fantasy standpoint, really all I care about is the fact that this guy's played 40 minutes in 4 of his last 9 games, Adam, and, has shown that he has a pretty decent ceiling at this price point and also a pretty gnarly haircut. Let's start with Zach Levine and Kobe White. Where are we going with the two of these guys, the two clear alphas on this team when the ball is in their hands?
It is so hard to get to these guys, even though I would like to. I like this game. It's just Levine's 9,500 on DraftKings, and I like him the most because Kobe White, he has a high ceiling. Like, he can score in bunches and plays, a lot of minutes. He's the only guy on the team other than Levine averaging over 30 minutes per game. So there's no questioning White's ceiling, but I think he's priced for it. Like, if you look at his average production, he's only averaging 0.93 DraftKings points per minute this year, only has a 21% usage rate, leads the team in assist percentage.
Which comes along with big minutes. Like, when you're playing 4 game, almost your usage, generally speaking, is going to come down a little bit at least. But your point is fair.
Yeah. It's my point just being like, he doesn't dominate usage like Levine does. Yep. So he still has that ceiling, but as far as I think median outputs go, he's pretty overpriced. Levine, I'm not really sure he's overpriced at all. You're getting, he's averaging about 36 minutes per game, has a 30% usage rate, 20+% assist percentage. He's averaging 1.25 fantasy points per minute. That's all great. It's just, how do you get to Zach Levine when Giannis is $900 more, when Kevin Durant is $600 more, when Steph Curry is $300 more? Obviously that matchup's a lot more difficult, but the point just being that there's so many guys to pay up for here. It's really tough to prioritize Levine. That being said, all these guys to pay up for means that Levine's ownership is going to be low. There's really no way around that. We haven't projected at 9%. I'd be surprised if it got any higher than that. So he makes sense, especially you could, kind of mini game stack if you're getting like Christian Wood and Oladipo, and running it back with Levine or something like that. It's just going to be really hard to get to him in high frequency, I think. Nothing to do with him, just more to do with the other players on the slate.
Man, that price is crazy. And I was going to tell you that I would go Levine over Curry because I thought Curry would have maybe double the ownership, but their ownership is right in the same ballpark, same neighborhood. 3% difference between Curry and Zach Levine right now. And
I would lean Levine over Curry also, but it's just, it's splitting hairs to me. Like, Curry's the better fantasy producer, and he's getting the worst matchup. They look very similar.
Yep. Pretty negligible difference there. And ownership is showing that too, right? Right. Kobe White, honestly, I think the 7,600 is reasonable, but only because the minutes, like him and Levine are playing such insanely high minutes that if they're having a big game, it gives you the upside to have an even bigger game if you're actually shooting well. And it also gives you the opportunity to salvage some worse games if you're just on the floor, hopefully falling into some peripherals. But those price points are pretty difficult.
Also, if anyone is concerned about the back-to-back, Levine only played 31 minutes yesterday. White only played 25. So, not as legs should not be as tired as they would be if they had both played 40 yesterday.
Any news here? Patrick Williams game time decision. Porzingis will play as expected. That'll do it. But we do have some news, not news, but things to report for Chicago. Otto Porter Jr.'s out, Thomas Satoransky's out, and Chandler Hutchison's out. Does that affect your opinion on the rest of this team? Maybe there's some value that we can pull. Again, there should be this could turn into a barn burner, Adam. So I think we definitely want to cover these guys, even if they're not the greatest players.
This is the game where if I were like game stacking a game, or if for whatever reason, if I'm just like pretending that the Milwaukee-Brooklyn game doesn't exist and hoping that it blows out or just duds or whatever, this is the game I'd go to, because like there's a lot of players here that I think are really high upside plays, but that don't look that good in the context of the entire slate when you factor in the Brooklyn game. Lauri Markkanen, played about, I believe, 32 minutes yesterday. 32.9 minutes yesterday. He's relatively inexpensive, averaging 1.12 fantasy points per minute. Wendell Carter Jr., overpriced for his median projection, just like Kobe White, but gives you a ton of upside if he gets north of 30 minutes and can certainly have success here. So these guys look like high ceiling plays that shouldn't get much ownership. It's just, you're going to have to kind of work to get them into your lineup. Otto Porter being out, I don't think makes any one individual guy a great option, but I think it does open the door for more playing time potentially for Patrick Williams, assuming he's able to go, potentially for Thaddeus Young, who is only $3,800. I think Young is a value that you could look to, assuming he gets 24, 25 minutes. It doesn't, there's nobody that I look at, I'm like, oh, they're going to play 36 minutes. How do they fail? But it at least makes the path to a good game a little bit easier for guys like Williams and Young.
Morgan in our premium Slack chat asked, do you guys have any interest in the value in Chicago like Temple or Denzel Valentine?
A lot there depends on Patrick Williams. He was listed as probable. Now apparently he's a game time decision. If Williams sits, that's 30 plus minutes that are disappearing, which means that you would get, I think, substantially more run for Thaddeus Young, but also you would probably get Garrett Temple going from like mid-20s to 28 to 30, and Valentine getting a little bit more as well. So if Williams is in, I'm more interested in going to like Thaddeus Young at 3,800 than Temple at 45. But if Williams is out, then I think that Temple becomes a reasonable value as well.
Okay. And then Dave in our premium chat says, what about value in Arcidiacono at guard?
I'm not really that interested. Like, he played 17 minutes yesterday. I know Porter's out, but I don't expect it to have a big impact on Arcidiacono.
All right. Let's move it on. Golden State and the Lakers. It's the last game we're going to touch on here. And then, as you know, we're going to turn this one right over to the Live Before Lock crew. That is Chris Spags, Greg Ehrenberg, taking you all the way up to lock. And remember, you guys, hear us talk about our ownership projections, our player projections, the boom bust tool, which we mentioned a lot on the show, whether it's football, we're talking about the top stack tool, which is one of the greatest things out there, baseball as well, once that season starts back up in a couple months. All of these tools, the lineup builder and all of the premium articles, the fantasy cruncher add-on, all of that stuff can be found at awesemo.com, AWESEMO.com. If you haven't checked it out yet, we've got something for absolutely everyone, from an express weekly pass for less than $4 a week, all the way up to the annual all access for any single sport that's out there. If they have contests on DraftKings and FanDuel, we have content for it, tools, ownership, all of that built by the #1 ranked DFS player, Alex Baker, Awesemo himself, tools that he uses, not just that we stick his name on and throw them out there like they're his, as you've seen people do in the past. These are his. He's won a lot of money with them, and so have a lot of people that have signed up. So if you have any questions, you can DM me on Twitter, but otherwise check it out at awesemo.com/join. Packages across any type of player that you are, we've got you covered. All right, Adam, Golden State and the Lakers, 227.5 total. Lakers laying 8.5 points at the Staples Center. Not the sexiest game. Pretty big spread. I guess we can start with the Warriors, and we can do with Stephen Curry. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really brutal spot for Golden State going up against this Lakers team. The Lakers, one of the most efficient defensive teams in the league. Golden State battling with Dallas for the lowest implied total on the slate. But Curry's been good this year. He has a couple of games that really hurt from a fantasy standpoint, but overall he's averaged just shy of 1.4 fantasy points per minute. He's averaging 34.5 minutes per game. His salary is reasonable if you can't afford to get all the way up to someone like Luka. Curry clearly still has that monster ceiling. He has one game this year already with 60 actual points. So that's very unlikely, but in the range of outcomes for him at least, and you're getting a little bit of savings there. So very similar, you and I mentioned it before, but to me, very similar to Levine, where I'm happy getting to whatever Curry I can get to, but I just think it's going to be really hard to prioritize him because there's guys that I like a lot more at not that much higher of a salary.
Do you have anyone else that you really like from Golden State? If you want to talk about Wiseman or anybody else here? I'll
mention Wiseman. I don't want to say I really like him because I'm still concerned about his minutes. I do think it's worth noting he's played 26 and 27 minutes in his last two games, which were both career highs. In the first game, Eric Paschall was out, so I think that had something to do with it. But then he did it again the next game. Prior to those two games, he was averaging about 19 minutes per game since Draymond Green had returned from his injury. So I don't want to just completely jump on board and say James Wiseman's playing 27 minutes a game now. But at the same time, there's no reason for Golden State not to be letting him play as much as he can. As long as he can stay out of foul trouble, stay on the floor.
Is he locked into the blowout run? It seems like every time they get blown out, he's the only starter that stays on the floor to close out games.
Yeah, I haven't paid close attention as far as if it happens every time, but I know it has happened at times at least. Because there was one point where it was kind of like if the game's close, he's not playing more than 24 minutes, and if the game's not close, he's playing 24 minutes, so it doesn't matter.
Right.
So I do think that's a good point here, where even if this game does blow out, you're probably getting at least decent run from Wiseman. So he is really cheap. He's a center, which is unfortunate, but he has been productive this year. And if you do get 26, 27 minutes from him, then he should do well here, I think.
I have him at 25 minutes. I think if he gets 25, it's a reasonable enough estimate that he should be good, at least at 4,600, but only center eligible, which, that's another story. There's not a lot to talk about with the Lakers, which is one of the reasons we didn't leave a ton of time for it. And we never leave a ton of time for anything because we're not very good at that. You're go ahead and break them down. It's the same Lakers team that we see every day.
Yeah. LeBron's questionable, really big surprise there.
He's playing.
Yeah, Davis is probable. So I'm assuming they're both in. They're the two guys you're going to look to. I mentioned it before, like the salary on James and the salary on Davis, they're both really, really favorable because, this is a good matchup against Golden State. The Warriors play one of the fastest paces in the league. They're one of the worst defensive teams. The problem is just that unless he absolutely has to, Frank Vogel's not running these guys that many minutes coming off the short off season. He's more than happy to give them 30, 31, 32 minutes, and that's reflected in their average minutes. So it's kind of like the Giannis situation where, if the game's competitive, you can get 34, 35 minutes from them. But this game's a lot less likely to be competitive than Giannis's game is. And right now, at least, you're getting a lot of ownership still going to LeBron. So it's not that I think LeBron's a bad play. It's just that with ownership where it is, I would rather try and find the money to get up to guys like Giannis, get up to Kevin Durant, et cetera. Beyond them, Dennis Schroeder's normally the third guy that I'm interested in. I will note that we have 2 games in a row now where most of his minutes have come alongside LeBron. Prior to that, he was getting his minutes staggered to where he was playing basically every minute that LeBron wasn't on the floor. If that trend continues, it's going to be bad for Schroeder's fantasy outlook. And then also Kentavious Caldwell-Pope on a slate kind of starved for value. We have him at $3,900 on DraftKings with guard and forward eligibility. Should play 25, 26 minutes, maybe a couple more if this game actually is close. He's averaging 0.8 fantasy points per minute this year. He should be able to get some defensive stats against this Golden State team. He should be able to get some open threes. I don't think he's the worst value play, especially if you're not getting much ownership.
All right. Yeah. Who would you say your favorite play from the Lakers is?
I mean, LeBron, if I can get there. Otherwise, I actually would say KCP.
Okay. And Schroeder's going to get you, if it's close, 30, 32 minutes. He's pretty discounted. I don't have an issue plugging him in some spots either. But you mentioned that already. We're up against it. Actually, we've already passed it. So we're going to pass the torch over to Spags and Greg, taking you up to 7:30 lock for this 4-gamer. Thanks as always for hanging out, guys. One more call to hit that thumbs up and subscribe to the channel, and check us out on Twitter at Awesemo_com, at Awesemo.com, at Awesemo.com, and Adam at ShipMyMoney DFS, myself at Lafayette_D. And thanks to our boy Jordan Klein for producing the show as always. Good luck today, guys. Stick around. We'll see you back here tomorrow.
There you go.
All right, man.
Hello. How's it going? I'm out. Wait a minute.
I should probably check to make sure you should hear me also. Can you hear me?
Okay, well, hold up. Wait, does my mic not come through right now?
It sounds kind of faded.
Oh, alright, hold up. Oh, I think I know why.
There we go. Yeah, that's because it's actually the right microphone. I guess the USB fell out over there. All right, I'm good to go. Yep. What is up, everyone? We are in the final hour of a long and arduous day of NBA if you played the early slates, but we'll talk about all of that as along with all the news and ownership, really all the things you need to know to have a good night tonight in the world of NBA DFS. I'm Chris Spags, joined by a man you know and love. He's here to bring you some quality knowledge on this Monday. It's Greg Ehrenberg. How you doing, Greg?
Yeah, well, I hope I have quality knowledge to bring today. This is maybe the hardest slate of the season. I don't know how you felt building lineups, but this is really hard to find value. The only thing we really have up in the air right now is Patrick Williams is a game time decision. It looks like his status is a little bit up in the air. But beyond that, I mean, it is tough to find value. There's not a lot of cheap plays to like, and then we've got a million all-stars on the slate also. So there's a lot of guys that could have really big games, and then it's just hard to find cheap guys that are worthwhile.
Yeah, we have some moving parts as well with Victor Oladipo making his debut for the Rockets tonight in a game against Chicago that could be a bit of a barn burner given the high pace and the poor defense that have been going on for Chicago. But we're going to get into all this stuff. And it's real fast, a quick plug for the like button. I have a promo for you guys, but I'll give you guys the deal we always give you on the NBA Live Before Lock shows when I'm on here. Make sure you guys hit that like button, get us to 1,000 likes. And if you do that, you'll get the top 5 owned plays on DraftKings and FanDuel for free, according to our ownership projections at Awesemo.com. So hit that like button right now, smash it, treat it with tender love and care, whatever you want to do with the like button. Make sure you're doing something that gets it going in the positive direction. And also go to Awesemo.com/join if you want to get in the spirit of MMA. Conor McGregor making his big return, lots of promo for his fight coming up. We have the promo code Conor in his honor, CONOR. Conor in his honor, I did not mean to rhyme, but it flowed so perfectly. But go to Awesemo.com/join and use the promo code Conor to get a week-long MMA subscription to Awesemo Plus for just $2.57. Very cheap number there, and you can play along in the world of DFS, get some Conor McGregor data in your life if you want to play him on DraftKings or FanDuel. Let's go over to Awesemo.com/join and use that promo code Conor. All right, Greg, so we said it up top here, value pretty specious, but one guy I'm getting a good amount of who the ownership, it seems thus far, not going there in an enormous way, or at least not as big as it was earlier. Thad Young, to me, looks like one value play I'm willing to take a little bit of. Also, Luau Cabro, shockingly high on our ownership, but we could talk about some pivots to Thad. But Thad's one guy who should see some minutes with no Porter Jr. I think also not having Patrick Williams, who is a game-time decision, as Greg mentioned, out. That could open up some more as well for Young. But just a guy who's competent enough per minute, theoretically could provide a little bit of defense against this new Rockets lineup. I'm willing to go to Thad as the value play of the day, Greg, barring whatever news we get coming up here. But where are you landing with him, both on DraftKings and FanDuel?
So let me ask you this. With you rostering Thad Young, is that assuming that Patrick Williams is in, out, limited, or some other weird situation?
I mean, I think it's mostly, I think, worrying about the Otto Porter vacancy. I've just been getting them all day, honestly. So I'm actually going to play with the numbers here. It might have been something with Awesemo's minutes that have changed throughout the day. But I think it's a spot where if Williams is out, then you're going to have more upside. And I think there's still enough run for him to get there without Otto Porter. Not that anything I'm confident in, but if we're starving for value, I just think he's one guy that I feel okay about, hopefully not completely submarining a lineup.
Yeah, so I mean, I have Thad Young playing 18 minutes and have him projected for about 13 fantasy points. So not somebody that I got to. But with that said, I have a bunch of very crappy cheap players that it's just like I have 5% of. Let's see. Let me go through some of the bad players I roster. Like I have like Ryan Arcidiacono lineups. I have lineups with Damian Lee, Kent Bazemore. I just have a bunch of guys like that who ended up coming in at like 10%. And these are all guys that I have projected for like 12 to 14 fantasy points on DraftKings. FanDuel is going to be a little bit different of a story because we don't necessarily have to find some of those just terrible 3K players to find because the minimum price is a little bit differently. So just talking from a DraftKings perspective, I don't like any cheap player. I mean, Thad Young, not somebody that I'm getting to. I'll feel differently if Patrick Williams is ruled out because then I think we have to give some of those minutes to Thad Young. Right now on FanDuel, I actually like Patrick Williams because if this is going to be a situation now where just nobody wants to roster him because he's on the injury report, he's somebody who's actually cheap and is in line to play extra minutes without Otto Porter there. So I think that he's somebody who at very low ownership, I like a little bit more than Thad Young. Obviously that would change if he's ruled out though.
So I'm looking at Awesemo's projection, and it seems like he's got him at 22 minutes. And for me, that ends up with Thad being projected for about 20.2 fantasy points, which is not a number that is actually, going to stir any emotions for you in a meaningful way. But that gives me about a 5.3x value on him and is going to make him pop up a little more in some of the sims that I run throughout the show here to get a read on how guys are going. I think he gets to his target score more. And granted, I think my projections do give a little bit more of a boost to the matchup here against Houston, which overall, this one to me looks pretty fast paced because Chicago's playing so fast, such poor defense. That's going to make Thad come up a little bit more. But I think that's sort of it to me. Now that he's 17% owned, I think earlier in the day we had him being a little bit closer to the mid 20s or high 20s. If a guy's going to be under 20% and he actually looks like stable value, I think that's sort of why I'm getting him more. So just to explain that, because I agree, like it's not a great play, but it's one where if he gives me 22 minutes, I feel like he can be productive enough in this particular spot.
Yeah, I'm just checking to see what Alex did with Patrick Williams's minutes. because he might have
I think he still has him
Williams.
getting 32, at least in the one that I just pulled. So
okay, yeah, he still has 32 minutes for Patrick Williams. That was something I was curious about. So yeah, I mean, I have Thad Young for, like I said, 17 minutes. So it's funny because giving Thad Young 22 minutes versus giving him 17 minutes, it doesn't seem like a lot in the grand scheme of things, but for when these guys are so cheap, like 5 minutes, when you're talking about, something like 4 or 5 fantasy points, that makes a massive difference on a points per dollar basis. So let's see what happens with Patrick Williams. Hopefully we get news on that during the show.
The bigger news is probably on the other side of the game, though. It's, we talk about it. It could be an interesting matchup here, though. The combined total, for whatever it's worth, not fantastic at a 225-point combined total. Seems like it should be a little higher, given these two teams that have not been playing good defense and given up some pretty big production against them all year long. But at Houston, Greg, I think there's some intrigue here. We're going to have a very chalky Victor Oladipo, also Christian Wood, who's been over 50 fantasy points the last couple games with this skeleton crew Houston team that's been playing recently. Oladipo, I think, an interesting play, but Wood, to me, even with his price up on DraftKings, I still am probably going to be there a good amount above the field, or at least, enough above the field to feel it. And Eric Gordon as well, not far behind, also going to be decently owned. His usage rate's been up on the year. Definitely can be the ball handler behind Oladipo. But how much are you getting these Rockets, Greg? Because people are also getting the PJ Tucker. And honestly, I don't hate that either, just because of this spot against Chicago.
So let me check this right now. So yeah, I am getting to PJ Tucker. I think he's actually my highest owned player on the Rockets. I have some exposure to Oladipo. I don't like Oladipo points per dollar on this slate though, but I just got to him, particularly on FanDuel. The shooting guard options, I know you don't play on FanDuel, but if you just check them out, they are terrible. So the players as shooting guard, I think the chalk, the last I looked, and let me see if this has changed, was like Dante DiVincenzo is a chalk play on FanDuel because the shooting guard options are so poor that people just don't know where to go to save money. I ended up getting to a decent amount of Dante DiVincenzo as well at shooting guard. It's a really tough position to fill. As for Oladipo, it's tough for me to really gauge him. This is his first game with a new team, so we don't know how familiar he is with the system. We don't know how many minutes he's going to play on this team. Overall, the Pacers have been really cautious with Oladipo over the last year and a half since he came back from that really bad knee injury, and he hasn't looked quite the same since then also. As some people pointed out while I was doing the show earlier this morning, the strategy show with Kaufman also, is now the reason that his fantasy production has been down. Has it been a result of him being a lesser player, or is it a result of he kind of became the third option in the offense behind Malcolm Brogdon and behind Domantas Sabonis? And now that he could potentially be the number one option with Houston, is that going to boost his fantasy production? I think it's probably somewhere in between. I think he's probably not quite the same player while also playing a lesser role. So Oladipo, the 7,500 price tag, I think it's about fair. I just think the ownership's a little high, so I'm coming in underweight to the field on him.
I mean, the argument for me, and this is one, based again, this Bulls matchup where they're really running at the fastest pace in the league, about a 107 pace, 112 defensive efficiency, which is another one of the worst marks in the league. So Oladipo coming in, especially in a spot with no John Wall active, you're going to see, I think, Oladipo get a lot of the work. I think people have some concern about Eric Gordon, but you can kind of stomach having 3 high usage guys in this lineup. Like somebody in the YouTube chat I just saw saying, I'm not playing Oladipo if Mason Jones is starting. Like, I don't think Mason Jones is getting minutes, even with Sterling Brown out now. We just got that news as Greg was talking. I feel like Oladipo, Awesemo has him playing 34 minutes. If you look at his rates for the year, the usage at 26.7%, is he going to have lower usage than Eric Gordon has had this year for the most part? Like, I don't think so. So that to me is why Oladipo, I feel a little more confident in the matchup. The fact that he's been productive. I mean, he's certainly, you're right, he's not the guy he was before the catastrophic injury he had, but still compared to last year, he's shooting a little better. True shooting is up to 54%, was closer to 51% last year. Like, I think there's enough signs of life with Oladipo in this particular spot that I'm willing to get with the field on him. And I guess that's the big question, Greg. Are you willing to at least be with the field on him, or are you going to significantly undercut him?
So not significantly undercut him, but I'm underweight to the field. I mean, he's the highest owned player on DraftKings right now. He's the number one highest owned most chalk play. And he's also in a new situation. We've never seen him on Houston before. We don't know what his role is going to be like. We don't know if he's going to play potentially limited minutes in his first game with the new team. He's not accustomed to them yet. And then we also have him at a price apex. This is the most expensive Oladipo has been all season, and more expensive than he was all of last season. This is the most expensive Oladipo has been since before getting injured, when he was right around 8K. So he's priced as if he's almost the same player that he was before injuring his leg, because he was a guy right around that time that was priced 82, 8,300, if I remember correctly. So he's almost there already. And that's really the issue I have is there's a lot of uncertainty. The ownership's really high. Here's how I would feel about Oladipo. If the ownership was at least low, then I'd feel better about going to him with the uncertainty, because I think there's a lot of variance here. And when I think about how much variance there is, I'd rather be on the side of being off him just because the field is already there, but I'd be on him with the variance if the field wasn't there. So it's not that he's a total fade for me, but I'm underweight to the field in tournaments.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I guess I might be a little more of a believer. And, overall, I think Oladipo, we're going to find out a lot about him tonight. But, we really have seen a spot for the Rockets the last few games where we had the massive game by Sterling Brown. Ben McLemore disappointing in that one, but a good amount of Rockets had production. Mason Jones as well, a guy who I thought had a chance to get run that first game where all the other Rockets went off. But then, Mason Jones gets the run over the weekend and ends up having a monster day too. Like if you're seeing, I know we might not think the highest of Victor Oladipo, but Greg, I think we'd agree, is Oladipo better than Mason Jones and Sterling Brown? Do you want to go on that limb with me, or just is that only for Eric Bledsoe?
Yeah, I think even Eric Bledsoe is better than Mason Jones and Sterling Brown, and Victor Oladipo certainly is as well. Even the diminished version of Victor Oladipo is better than Mason Jones and Sterling Brown.
Yes, I like Mason Jones. I'm intrigued by Mason Jones, and Sterling Brown's had some fine days as a buck in the past. But Oladipo, I think it's a game of usage here, and there's enough to go around for this Houston team. Speaking of, Greg, what's your stance on Christian Wood? Because he is priced up. We've seen the ceiling here, but again, it's a nice spot against Chicago. He's had some ball handling time. The 3-point shooting has been there for him. At least relatively with the attempts up, 4.7 attempts per game for him this year. He's assisting relatively competently, rebounding, doing everything you want to see out of a guy to have the full upside. Where are you landing with Christian Wood?
Yeah, I think this is a pretty good spot for Christian Wood. One thing that I do find it pretty hard to wrap my head around, he's more expensive than Anthony Davis on FanDuel, which just seems pretty crazy, but yet I still have them projected about comparably. Christian Wood, I think it's sub 20% ownership on FanDuel, and then on DraftKings, he's coming in at, let's see, what's the latest for him? He's a little more popular on DraftKings at nearly 30% now. But even at those numbers, I still haven't projected decently well. He's somebody that I am getting to. It's just, there's so much role for him there, especially with James Harden and John Wall not there. I mean, you look at the last 3 games for Christian Wood, nearly a 30% usage rating. All the rebound numbers are there for him. And they're staggering his minutes with DeMarcus Cousins, right? So he doesn't really have to share the floor with Boogie that much. That helps his rebound numbers. That's helped his usage. As long as they keep it that way, where it's not all of a sudden Cousins playing a bunch of minutes alongside Wood, he's going to crush all season.
Yeah, I'm with you on it. Wood's been a guy, I think, I tweeted it a couple days ago when Christian Wood had the explosion on national TV where, sometimes there is a correlation between these guys having fantasy results and being a competent real life player. And I think a guy like Wood, who since I think summer leagues years ago, has just been doing it time and time again, contributing in every category, but especially points and rebounds. There's a lot of reason to like him today, again, for a lot of the reasons going against Chicago, who has been one of the best matchups in fantasy this year, not even worrying about DVP, just the fact that they play fast and they don't play defense, 2 key parts. To close the loop on Houston, Greg, are you getting Eric Gordon? I feel like we've talked a little bit about getting some PJ Tucker, but Gordon relative to ownership too. I mean, he's been upwards of a 27% usage rate guy in the year. I think now it's fallen to 23 overall this season, but coming back from injury, maybe I think a little more reason to be cautious, but still a 24%-ish ownership. I'm willing to go even the mid 30s with Eric Gordon just because I think there's some upside because of this spot.
Yeah, I like Gordon. I'm around even with the field on him, which I think kind of qualifies as like him on this slate just because he's such a popular play. With John Wall and James Harden not there for Houston, we're just trying to figure out who's going to be handling the ball. And especially if I think that Oladipo could potentially be limited or maybe not be the guy right off the bat for Houston, that's even more reason for me to like Eric Gordon. So Gordon, I mean, there's minutes to fill. Also, now that Sterling Brown's out, that doesn't seem like a huge deal, except that is a few more minutes that overall have to be distributed amongst the wing players on Houston. So I think that Eric Gordon, he's somebody else that is worth rostering in this game.
And just one more guy here who you mentioned fast, but Mason Jones. Do you have him projected falling out of the rotation entirely? Because it does look like Awesemo has him for 0 minutes. So people are asking about him because he played big minutes over the weekend. But I think there are enough bodies here now with Gordon and Oladipo coming back that even with Brown out, I don't see Jones getting at least enough run to be useful in fantasy.
No, I have him playing 6 minutes now, and that's only because Sterling Brown's out, and it's just who else is going to play some of those minutes because this is a team that's fairly thin on the wing. And the guys that they do have that thrown out there are just terrible. It's like Jayshawn Tate, Ben McLemore, David Nwaba. So it's who's going to take guard minutes for them. So Mason Jones, yeah, I agree with you. I think that even if he does play, it's not going to be enough to be fantasy significant. I have him in the rotation, but not in a way that anybody should care about.
Yeah, just too many guys who actually are rotation guys coming back in, and Mason's probably got some better days ahead of him, particularly when there are rest days for guys like Oladipo or Eric Gordon hits the IR again, whatever it may be. Another team here, and again, guys, hit that like button because we got about 10 minutes left until it's money time on the show. The hat gets flipped, everything gets serious on here, but we do like to give away the top 5 owned plays on DraftKings and FanDuel, but we need you guys to get to 1,000 likes. That's just a self-respecting thing. There's no talent in the world who would do a show with less than 1,000 likes. So make sure you hit that like button here if you want to get the top 5 owned plays according to our ownership projections for DraftKings and FanDuel. Let's talk about Brooklyn, Greg, because I'm curious your thoughts here. This spot really a potential Eastern Conference Finals preview, maybe, depending on how the matchups shake out, obviously. But I know Kyrie Irving, he's still out for health protocols and them allegedly getting him into shape, even though I think it's just health protocols because he was gallivanting around the world like Carmen Sandiego without a mask. But now we do have James Harden in tow. We have Kevin Durant in tow. And Greg, in their debut, these guys had 37% usage rates each. Harden also rebounded a lot more as DeAndre Jordan just kind of let him get the full Westbrook treatment en route to that triple-double. And I think these guys look fantastic today. They're so expensive though, Greg, especially if you're trying to game stack things. What are you doing with Brooklyn with this new look with Harden and Durant?
So I didn't really get to Durant today. I did get to Harden a whole bunch. And if Kyrie was in, this was a situation I was not interested in. But now that we don't have Kyrie Irving in and that's confirmed, we could look at what the roles were for these guys last game. And I think we could kind of project them to play about the same, which was James Harden basically played point guard, had a massive usage rate, did kind of everything for them. And then we had Durant playing his normal role there. As long as Kyrie isn't there, there's enough shots to go around for both of these guys. Once Kyrie gets added to the mix, I have no clue what the hell to make of it. But for now, I feel pretty good about at least James Harden as a play. I didn't really want to get to both Durant and Harden. And I think that Harden is a little bit more sensible of a play. He's at a position that's harder to fill on FanDuel, and he's also a little bit cheaper. And then on DraftKings, even though Harden's a little bit more expensive, I think his game just suits a little bit better for DraftKings with the lack of the turnovers, only being negative half a point. And then he also is going to get double-double, potentially triple-double bonus. So I've Harden projected pretty well today.
Yeah, Harden, I do feel I'm with you. I think that's a little bit of a stronger play. Overall, Harden being a lead ball handler, going to be having to do a lot today against Milwaukee. Durant, though, this ownership for both guys has come down enough. I didn't smash him in, but I'm going to be about double the field on both of them just because there's just nobody else who's shooting right now. The deeper dive guys, I think Adam mentioned it last show, that Joe Harris was really the number 3 usage guy behind the two of them at 15%. Like it's not anybody else shooting or even possessing the ball for the most part, at least off this 1 game sample size. We'll see. And I agree. I think when Kyrie comes back, going to get a little weirder. You'll probably have 3 guys with staggered minutes and 30% usage rates. And that's going to really nobody else on the team is going to be viable. But Durant, I think, is interesting. And I guess, Greg, maybe you feel differently, though, because you're a little down on Durant. Do you think that any of these other guys have some signs of life? Like Luau Cabro is going to be pretty decently owned, and DeAndre Jordan as well should have better rebounding days than he had in Harden's debut. So are you getting other nets here in the spot?
DeAndre Jordan, yes, especially if you go look at the center options on FanDuel. I know you don't play there, but just look at them really quick. Do me a favor and tell me what you make of it. The most expensive center today on FanDuel is Wendell Carter Jr. So it is a mess of trying to figure out who to roster at center on FanDuel because all those guys like Anthony Davis, Christian Wood, they're power forward eligible on FanDuel, and there's no multi-positional thing. So on center, I found it impossible to get away from DeAndre Jordan. Just the centers, there's a bunch of those guys that are priced about the same. Montrezl Harrell, DeAndre Jordan, Wendell Carter Jr., DeMarcus Cousins even in the mix, that I think that you just kind of have to mix and match. It's almost like the center position is almost like how we viewed the tight end position the last kind of like 8 weeks in fantasy football, where it's just like, all right, I'm just going to spray and pray, and I hope one of these guys ends up in my top lineup, because it is really hard to like any of the centers on FanDuel. So DeAndre Jordan, somebody who I got to a decent amount on FanDuel. Were you able to bring that up, by the way?
Yeah, I actually want to jump back to this for a second, but I want to ask you about James Wiseman, because I think he jumps out as a center play I'd be intrigued by on FanDuel, and you didn't mention him, I think, at least unless I just kind of mentally tuned out while I was pulling some stuff up. But is Wiseman not in consideration for you on FanDuel?
No, he is. So there's a bunch of guys that I have like 15 to 20% ownership on. Wiseman's one of them. It's Wiseman, Cousins, Jordan, Willie Cauley-Stein, and Montrezl Harrell. I feel good about none of them, but it's just I don't. There's no center place to like. I'm just being honest. There's nobody there I looked at and was like, I really feel great about him relative to ownership. The guy I'm most overweight to the field on is Boogie Cousins, and it's just because I think even in 18 minutes, I think DeMarcus Cousins could score like 26 fantasy points. And that probably makes him the best center play on the slate on FanDuel. It's impossible to find somebody to like.
Yeah, just looking at Awesemo's projections, like I feel like Willie Cauley-Stein would be the other one I would get to a good amount. But yeah, this is a real, just so you guys are aware of the FanDuel center slate, because it is different than DraftKings where you have Christian Wood, some other guys, even Giannis, you could play at center. Actually, Kevin Durant also a center on DraftKings, which is just not helpful in any way. But Wendell Carter, Willie Cauley-Stein, Brook Lopez, Montrezl Harrell, Mason Plumlee. Mason Plumlee, I guess that might be from the earlier slate, so that's incorrect. But yeah, Wiseman, DeAndre Jordan, yeah, that's a tough group.
It's bad. So a little bit of a cop out there by saying I like DeAndre Jordan on FanDuel because who's there to really like there? But I like him a little bit on DraftKings too. The minutes weren't really there for him in the first game that we had the Durant and James Harden combination, but still going forward with no Jared Allen there, I think we have to think that DeAndre Jordan's going to be a guy who's regularly playing in the neighborhood of 26 to 28 minutes. And like we said in the past about DeAndre Jordan, even if he isn't really a good real life basketball player anymore, still a guy who's going to score around a fantasy point per minute. So on a slate where it's really difficult to find value, I'm going to get exposure to him.
Yeah, no, that's fair. He's, expected to be playing a little more minutes. So I saw conflicting sources on his minutes from the other games, so I wasn't really sure how much he got in, because I know Popcorn Machine had him at one amount, and then Fantasy Cruncher had him at a lesser amount, but it's still really one big body they can go to. Reggie Perry not going to be trusted enough there. I think there's some ways he gets played off the floor against Milwaukee, but I agree, like on FanDuel, with all the crap heap on there, you probably have a better case to play some of DeAndre Jordan more than on DraftKings. What are you getting from the Bucks, Greg? Because this is another part of the equation where I'm curious how it goes. Like, I do expect this game to be competitive. Giannis's rates are down, but in a competitive spot, against an East rival, it does seem like Giannis may be worthwhile here, and honestly has some potential here to be a player that kills a lot of lineups in terms of just not having him. He's only 25% projected owned on DraftKings. Easily has the potential to be a number one scorer and a slate breaker. What are you getting out of these Bucks against Brooklyn? And again, a game that has a total only 4 points favoring Milwaukee.
Yeah, so I have right around 20% exposure to Giannis on DraftKings, a little bit lower than that on FanDuel. The difference being on FanDuel is that he's 11,400 as opposed to his 10,400 price tag on DraftKings. So I think this is a pretty good spot for Giannis. And as good as the Nets offense I think is going to be in the James Harden, Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving era, the defense I think is going to be very bad, like really, really bad. And I also think they're going to play at a pretty fast pace. They're going to score a lot of points. So I think this is going to be one of the top teams to target against for DFS. I mean, nobody's going to top what the Kings are doing because they give up like 135 points every single night. But I think the Nets could be like the second or third best team to go up against for fantasy purposes. The other thing too is that teams are absolutely going to have to shoot a lot and play at a fast pace, try to keep up with the Nets offense. I think this is a good spot for Giannis. There's nobody who can really guard him on the Nets. And especially until they get another center alongside DeAndre Jordan, they're going to struggle around the rim because Jordan, like we said, he's not the same player he once was from a real life perspective, especially on defense. So that's a huge issue for the Nets, is that not only is Jordan himself not a good defensive center, they don't have anybody really on the depth chart behind him, right? They're giving minutes to like Nick Claxton. And that's going to be an issue for them going forward. So I think the defense is going to struggle. I don't really like the price point on Drew Holiday or Chris Middleton, but Giannis is somebody I'm getting exposure to.
Yeah, I think Drew Holiday I got a little bit of just because point guard and shooting guard. I one move for me to get away, I think, is paying down across all the positions, and that puts Drew a little more in play. 7,200 on DraftKings, but I think the point about the defense is actually a pretty good one too, because they're at a 106.7 defensive rating overall right now, and you'd have to expect that to go down just by not having Jared Allen alone. The guy has been a pretty good rim protector for the most part. There's going to be a trickle down and just having less competent wing bodies to defend guys like Taurean Prince. Not going to be out there. I think that makes some sense here. And I guess maybe a little more chance of Milwaukee getting weird here than the total would imply, but Yeah, I think that makes sense. And Giannis, I think it's just worth matching the field on, at least on DraftKings, and dual position eligibility. If you want to get weird at center and not go to Christian Wood, I think that's one way to go, is just putting Giannis in at center, or Kevin Durant. Two interesting, complete non-centers who are available on center at center in this game. Got about 2 minutes here left till the halfway point of the show. Only 722 likes. So give me a best effort here. Try to get us to 1,000 likes. And I don't want to penalize you guys by not giving out the top 5 owned plays, because it's not your fault. It's a community. It's a team effort here. But smash that like button if you can. And if you want to get those top 5 owned plays according to our projections at Awesemo for DraftKings and for FanDuel. Let's see. People are saying Williams out. Did we get news about Williams that came through, or is that just something?
Let me see if it happened while I was talking, which is a possibility. Let's see.
No alert from Fantasy Schmabs. So
let's
or
see.
News God.
Yeah, I don't see anything from El Negro Loco. So I'm going to say nothing yet. Still a game time decision.
Yeah, I know. We try to keep up with the news as best we can, and if we see a lot of people in chat saying something, we do. But try to only give a real information in chat if you can, because we just want to make sure we're giving you guys the best we possibly can do while we're on the air here. People are saying Williams out and Temple in. I don't know if it's just guessing. Again, just don't put your guesses in, because it just throws us for a loop here when multiple people are doing it at once. Let's see what other, I'm trying to think if we could squeeze in anything else here real fast. Greg, give me your thoughts on Toronto's center situation, because I know the deeper dive guys have sort of been on this beat like journalists every single show, talking about Chris Boucher and his minutes being a little more fungible. And recently we've seen a lot of times where Chris Boucher coming in the second half in matchups where there isn't a problematic big man on the other side. Boucher, going a reasonable price still on Toronto, I think maybe has a negative impact on guys like Siakam for the most part in their shared court time. But to me, 20% owned Boucher, I feel like could be one of those parts that, you don't want to go crazy on, because there is some risk, but I like him. He's a per minute beast. We talk about it a lot, but what are you doing with Chris Boucher today?
I am overweight to the field on Chris Boucher today. I don't know if he's going to start or not. I'm also not sure it entirely matters. First of all, here's the main reason he hasn't been starting, because I was looking at some of the lineup combinations. When the Raptors run their 5-man lineup with Chris Boucher in it, they're getting outscored by about 12.5 points per 100 possessions. So that starting lineup with Boucher in it, where it's Van Fleet, Lowry, Anunoby, Siakam, and Boucher, they get crushed on the court together. It's just a combination that doesn't work. So I understand why Nurse isn't going to it, but at the same time, Boucher is clearly one of their 5 best players. So it's a weird situation where I don't really know what the right answer is. From an actual fantasy standpoint, though, it doesn't really matter for Chris Boucher, because even coming off the bench, he's been getting 30 plus minutes lately, and he's been scoring a bunch of fantasy points with it. And his salary, at least on DraftKings, hasn't gone up enough. He was at, I think, like 6,800 the other day. He's at 7,100 now, but over the last, 2 weeks now, he's averaging over 40 fantasy points. So it's still not enough for a price tag. I'm overweight to the field on Boucher on DraftKings. I think that whether he starts or comes off the bench, I almost kind of prefer he comes off the bench, because I don't think it's going to impact his production all that much. But I think that him coming from the bench to the starting lineup, I think it'll impact his ownership if we find out he's starting.
Our boy Jordan Klein corroborating the YouTube chat. This is when it works best, when the YouTube chat and everybody behind the scenes can work together. But there is a report that it is now Otto Porter and Williams out. Hutchinson and Satoransky also both out. Garrett Temple upgraded from probable and will play, according to the Rockets reporter Kaylee Griffin. So, Greg, we talked about Thad Young in the first half of the show, and we'll also keep an eye on ownership and give you guys an update whenever it comes through, the most recent run that we'll have. But no Williams was sort of the signifier that I thought would add more hope to Thad Young's day. And now I would think that it makes him a little more of an improved play than he would already been in a night devoid of value. So how does this affect your views on the value for the Bulls?
Yep, I was not going to like Thad Young before, as we talked about at the top of the show. Now Patrick Williams is out. You have to distribute some of those minutes somewhere. Some are going to go to Thad Young. So I think Thad Young now becomes the best value play on the slate, particularly for DraftKings, just because there's nobody cheap that I think we could really expect to play even north of 20 minutes reliably. And now I think we can for Thad Young, and he's the only one of those cheap players that make sense. By the way, we have the Raptors starting lineup, and Boucher is not starting. It is Aaron Baines at center.
So, I mean, it could very much be the same thing. I guess we now know we won't get 2 full starting halves of Boucher, but I feel like at a certain point, like they keep making the move at halftime. There's going to be probably a game where it doesn't happen, but it's Willie Cauley-Stein. Like that doesn't feel to me like a spot where you wouldn't put Boucher in the second half.
Yeah, I have Chris Boucher at 24-1 to win sixth man of the year. I think he's winning right now. I just don't know what this I don't know what the rules are for sixth man of the year. It's already a dumb award as is, and now it's like, well, what if he starts the second half, but he never starts the first half? Does that still make him eligible? I don't know what the rules are.
Well, our producer Jordan has decreed one thing here. We might not know about Chris Boucher's six-man eligibility. We do know it is in fact money time. So I will flip the hat here. You can also see all my shaggy hair that I don't deploy on this show. And we're going to pull up the top 5 owned plays. Anyway, you got to hit 1,000 likes, but it's MLK Day. It's a holiday. I'm not going to be too hard on you guys, but tomorrow you better get that goddamn 1,000 likes, I swear, or else I won't be doing this free generosity for you guys. But here are the top 5 owned plays on DraftKings according to our ownership projections that we have at Awesemo.com. These from 11 minutes ago, so it won't reflect the Bulls news. But Victor Oladipo, number 1 at 28%. Eric Gordon, 27.5% behind him. LeBron pulling up at number 3. A little bit of a surprise to me there. Giannis at number 4, 24%. Number 5, James Wiseman. This is DraftKings at 23%. On FanDuel, currently looks like it'll be Kyle Lowry at number 1. Again, pending some of these changes here with some of the value opening up. James Harden, number 2 at 37%. Victor Oladipo at 32%. Luka Doncic at 31%. And LeBron again at 31%. Am I missing something with this, Greg? Because I guess we haven't gotten the news about Anthony Davis yet, but I don't love LeBron as much as the field does. How are you feeling about LeBron and how are you handling, I guess, the chance that he could end up being a guy getting full run if Anthony Davis does miss the game?
So by the way, LeBron is currently listed as questionable. Anthony Davis is probable on the last injury report. So it is a little weird that LeBron's projected for that much ownership. I think also at this point, maybe people just don't really care about the Lakers injury report. Like, what are you going to do with it at this point? LeBron's listed questionable every game since game 1. Nobody's going to take it seriously. It's the boy who cried wolf type situation. Eventually, he's going to get ruled out, and everybody's going to be totally taken off guard by it because he's been listed questionable every game. But I actually kind of like LeBron for the slate, and not because of anything other than it's hard to find value. And we have all these guys to pay up for. The price tags on LeBron and AD have come down. Earlier in the day, I thought I was not going to like these guys at all. But that was also because I assumed that Kristaps Porzingis wasn't playing earlier in the day. So I assumed there was a little more value at that point in time. And that made it easier to get up to guys like Giannis and Luka Doncic. But once we had a little bit of less value on the slate, by less, I mean no value, it just made it hard to go all the way up to the top guys. And that's what made LeBron and Anthony Davis stand out to me at least a little bit more. Because these are guys who are, priced a little bit cheaper than normal. And I just needed that salary savings in a lot of lineups.
Yeah, I mean, I just think for me, if I were paying up today, I do think that the Brooklyn guys, with what we've seen at least so far from them, I'm a little more willing to take that stab. We talked about Giannis. Like, I'd rather be on Giannis than LeBron, even though he is a little bit more expensive than LeBron right now. I feel a little more confident in that play than a Lakers team who could, quite frankly, just run away with things. And we don't predict blowouts, but the Lakers do it enough where I do feel like if I'm choosing between things that might mostly be equal. And to be clear, like, I do think Giannis projects better. I think Harden projects better. I think Durant projects better per dollar. I just don't see the reason to go to LeBron as much as the field seems to be. But again, the ownership projections do get more accurate as we get closer to lock, so things could change around a bit. And we have about 25 minutes left till lock time. So keep that in mind for everybody out there. Greg, has anything changed materially for you? I'm actually just updating my sheet to see how the Bulls now look with no Patrick Williams, because I think that's reflected in the most recent update. But do you have an official landing point for our Thad Young, so we can finally close the loop on the much debated, much ballyhooed Thad Young?
Yeah, I'm getting to Thad Young now. I'm also going to get to Garrett Temple. I think that he stands to play some minutes now. A small amount of Denzel Valentine as well, just because the cheap options on the slate suck, not because I actually think Denzel Valentine is any good from a points per minute perspective. It's just like, hey, here's a guy who might play 20 minutes and score 15 fantasy points. That could be enough for this particular slate. But here's actually what did matter. Now that I have exposure to Thad Young and to Garrett Temple, I'm able to get to some of the more expensive guys on the slate that I wasn't able to get to before.
People will notice on the screen, if it's still up, a very lovely meme that our own Jordan Klein made and had to bring to my attention in Slack. But LeBron is the Riddler, constantly questionable. He's leaning into the questionable bit as much as I am the money bit. So that's a good one. LeBron looking very slender. Also, the outfit not flattering to Jim Carrey's crotch in hindsight. I feel like I could say that.
Yeah, I never really put all that much thought into Jim Carrey's crotch in any of the previous movies he's been in. But yeah, I'll do a bunch of research for you later on. I'll look up his outfits in the mask. I'll look up Ace Ventura, and then I'll come back with a full scouting report. That'll be it. Yeah, it's money time. That's what I'm going to be doing. That's what's going to pay the bills tonight.
Like, the more you know, we always say the biggest edge in DFS is knowing how Jim Carrey's crotch looked when he played the Riddler in the 90s Batman movies. So that's the thing here. We got a couple super chats real fast. Kyle R. No one has talked about Schroeder all day. He seems decent on FanDuel for a GPP at 6K considering positions. Is he dead wrong? Greg, you are the FanDuel expert, playing more on there than I do. I'm a DraftKings boy, near and dear to my heart, but I did get some Schroeder on DraftKings just because of the lack of value. Schroeder's cheap enough to have upside. I don't mind being there a bit, but it's a different story on FanDuel, Greg. So how are you feeling about him?
He is my second highest owned point guard on FanDuel behind Kyle Lowry. I agree. The price is cheap. It's hard to find value. And then you just look at some of those, kind of mid-tier type guys in terms of guys who are priced in mid-range that have potential upside. Dennis Schroeder has scored over 30 fantasy points in 3 of his last 5 games. It's a positive matchup against the Warriors. And this is another thing, too, where we've seen Anthony Davis and LeBron James, the roles get limited a little bit this year because of the additions of Montrezl Harrell and Dennis Schroeder. It seems like sometimes if the Lakers are coasting, up like 12, 15 points, they have no problem just saying like, hey, let's give Montrezl Harrell and Dennis Schroeder a couple extra minutes today, and we'll kind of save LeBron and Anthony Davis for a game that's a little bit closer. So it's something we've seen a lot where they're fine just kind of handing the keys to the offense to Schroeder. So I like him a lot at his price point at 6,000 on FanDuel.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point there. And, certainly a matchup against Golden State can almost as good as the one against Chicago that we talked about earlier on. Golden State, playing fast, not particularly good at defense. So they have started to trickle up a bit upwards there with Draymond Green back in the mix. Let's keep going through here. We got one more super chat to hit on. Timothy Tylon Tylon? I don't know. Talion saying Luka back-to-back seems like an issue. He hasn't looked in great shape this year. Greg, he's coming off one of his best games of the year. And, I think maybe some cause for concern, though. He has been a little bit out of shape, I think, to the human eye at least, and not shooting the best to start the year. I still wouldn't grade that against him, but, I still like Luka. I don't love him. He's not a smash play to me relative to the other ownership we have for some of the top priced guys. But how are you landing with Luka, and do you care at all about the back-to-back in this spot against Toronto?
Yeah, it matters a little bit, right? It's definitely something that weighs on my mind a little bit, but it just to a point where it's like, instead of making Luka somebody I'm rostering like 40%, it's like, well, I'm rostering Luka 20% instead. So he's definitely somebody who's still in my player pool. There's a lot of guys on the high end who I wanted to get exposure to. I would have liked Luka a lot if Porzingis was resting, as I thought he was going to earlier in the day, because back-to-back with Porzingis, they didn't really play much in back-to-backs last year. So him coming off knee surgery, I assumed he was going to be resting today. That's not the case. I'm a little concerned about his workload and what that's going to be. But still, I think Luka is viable. But in terms of relative to his ownership, it's fair to me. I don't have like a real lean relative to where the field's at, whether he's a strong or weak play. I think he's pretty neutral.
Yeah, and the Vegas total, is sort of the main gospel to go with if you are worried about a guy like Luka. And it's only a 5-point spread favoring Toronto. It's not, it could be better. I think you would imagine maybe if Dallas were coming off of a rested situation, but still, it's not anything that comes close to a blowout. So I really wouldn't try to advocate too much concern, even if, to me, the 21% ownership projected for him in our most recent run, that seems about right. One more super chat here, and then we'll also look at the premium Slack because we had some questions built up there. D. Owens or Dowens 89 asking for a FanDuel GPP. Would you go Doncic or Giannis and double punt your point guard? So Greg, you're playing on FanDuel. The position part is a big component to the game on FanDuel. Would you want to go to Doncic or Giannis? And then if you go to Giannis, then you got to go real cheap at point guard.
Yeah, so I have more exposure to Doncic, and it's kind of for the reason that he just mentioned, right? Because if you look at the really cheap options at point guard on FanDuel, they are terrible. The guy who I've projected for the most fantasy points that's sub 4,000 is Jalen Brunson. And I don't really think that's a particularly strong play. But then if you look at the power forward spot and some of the cheap options there, now we have guys like Draymond Green is only 5,400. We have Thad Young, who's now viable. We have PJ Tucker, who's 4,100. Jeff Green, who's 4,000. So there's a lot of cheap power forwards that I think are viable options. And at point guard, those guys just don't exist. So that's the reason why I think it makes more sense to spend up for Luka than it does for Giannis.
While we're talking about Brunson, we did get the news that came through that he's apparently starting, and that should boost his minutes projection by a few. I'm actually just running Awesemo's new numbers in here to see how that looks. But does that change the equation at all for you with Brunson, or is that something you're already accounting for?
I'll give him a couple extra minutes now. Yeah, it definitely makes him viable. It's somebody I'm going to get exposure to. It doesn't change my Luka versus Giannis answer, but it is funny that I just happened to point out that Brunson was the guy who I projected for the most fantasy points sub 4K, but didn't think he was a viable play, and now he's definitely viable.
Yeah, Brunson, it does look like it makes him a better play overall as a value. His price on DraftKings 4K doesn't look fantastic. Let me just see. Let me double check my projection against Awesemo's because I want to make sure we're giving you guys good information. But yeah, Brunson, 24-point projection for Brunson from Awesemo, which would make him easily one of the best value plays on the slate. So he's got him a little better projected than I do. Yeah, I mean, I feel like you got to cram some in at this point. He was projected for 10% ownership before this news. Do you think that he would be a better value play than Thad Young now that we know that he's going to also be getting, or at least assuming he's getting some starter run?
Yes. I have him projected higher. And then the other thing too is like we've seen Thad Young play minutes this year with the Bulls banged up. And it's not like he's somebody they're giving, 30 plus minutes to or something like that. There is potential for Jalen Brunson to play 30 plus minutes. There's also potential for Brunson to suck. So he's not like an all-in play or anything like that. But I think that if you're just trying to rank the top value plays on the slate, Brunson is number one by a pretty wide margin now.
Yeah. And I think, for me, it looks like I would have him worth about 30% ownership. So the number is going to come up a little just because of the fact that we haven't had the updated ownership yet. That news just came out. But it does seem like Brunson now a very strong value play, and at least for me in line with Thad Young, if not a little bit ahead. Let's see here. Any questions in the premium Slack? Going to jump around here a little bit, guys, and try to fix up. Greg and I both are going to have to fix up our lineups as we go. The slate starter guys touted Wes Iwundu as a possible salary saver. Is he still in that? No, he's not in that starting group now. So I would think Iwundu should be probably completely out of consideration.
So the reason that they were on Iwundu, and I was not in a major way, but somebody I had like 10% exposure to, was number one, because like I've said, the value options absolutely suck on this slate. But then number two, I thought Iwundu was going to be starting today. Mm-hmm. And now that it's Jalen Brunson who's starting, this makes Iwundu not really a good play at all anymore. But I understand where they were coming from because I was there a little bit before as well. But now with Brunson starting, we could downgrade him.
Yeah, I mean, I've been playing Iwundu more than I certainly am comfortable with too. I'm actually had one decent lineup on Friday that ended up getting torn apart by the Magic getting blown out by the Celtics, but that was the top of a couple tournaments and had Iwundu in it. And he's been playing like upwards of 30 minutes. But yeah, if he's not starting, and Brunson's going to be out there getting that run, it does seem like it's not a Iwundu night because he's not going to be like hyper productive off the bench. There's some guys, they don't start and you don't mind that much. If anything, it might just drive the ownership down. With Iwundu, he's a very low usage rate guy. So coming off the bench really won't help him out too much in any meaningful way here. Let's see, another questions. For CAC 2112, who would you want to go to for a FanDuel single entry, Greg? Wiseman or DeAndre Jordan? The question that we debated a little bit earlier.
So my lineups are updating with the latest big Jalen Brunson news, which is about as big as we could get. And as my lineups are running right now, I have 22% DeAndre Jordan and 21% James Wiseman. So I'll see where that ends up. The moral being there, though, I have them very, very similar. And the ownership is higher on Wiseman. So I'm going to say DeAndre Jordan just based on the fact that I have about equal exposure to them. And James Wiseman's coming in at 19% projected ownership compared to 14% for DeAndre Jordan. We're really picking at straws here. I mean, they're very, very similar. I'll slightly lean towards Jordan.
Okay. Yeah. I think that seems reasonable. I would favor Wiseman a little just based on my data, but I don't think you can go wrong either way. And you probably can't really go right either way would be the other side. It's
going to be really inconsequential. And there's going to be a situation where it's like, oh, look, like Cristiano Felicio or some dumb guy is going to come in and score like 22 fantasy points at 0.3% ownership. And he's going to be the guys in first place. And people will be DMing me and be like, how come Cristiano Felicio had a good game? It's like, I don't know why. He just did. So yeah, something dumb is going to happen at the center position on FanDuel. Just lock it in, guarantee it.
Yeah, that's it's not the prettiest slate as we talked about earlier on FanDuel. Let's see. You got one other question here for DK Cash. Who would be your stud pay up? I'm actually going to see if the ownership got an update because I think that's a helpful part here of Cash. I do tend to ascribe to good play plus highly owned. Does tend to be a good move for Cash. Pay up, I mean, relative to ownership, we talked about it a little bit ago, but Giannis and LeBron expected to be owned neck and neck on DraftKings today. I would favor Giannis, so I think he would be the stud. But Greg, how do you feel for a DK Cash pay up option?
Yeah, Giannis for me. There's a little bit more flexibility now that we have cheap options like Jalen Brunson and Thad Young to feel good about. But I think Giannis, relative to his 10,400 price tag and ownership, I think that he's the first guy I look to in cash games as a pay up option.
And Victor Oladipo also hanging in as a top 5 own play, and so we can update you guys because we did give you guys the free top 5. And of course, always get them for yourself at awesemo.com/join. NBA data, very important, a crucial part of the game, really. Obviously, it is for every DFS sport, but for NBA, you're watching the stream, you hopefully want to be winning some money. Important to know where the ownership goes, especially as these news items break. And Thad Young now projected for 24% ownership. I'll still be a bit above that, Greg, but now that Thad's getting chalky, at what point do you jump off Thad after this emotional roller coaster we've had where not too bullish on Thad, then Thad makes sense. And now it could be a very, very chalky Thad coming up.
Yeah, I'm still fine with that number. There's just not enough other good value plays to feel good about. Like I said, I prefer Jalen Brunson to Thad Young if you're just going with one of the value plays over another. But if you're not playing either of these guys, you're either making mid-range lineups to me, or I think you're just kind of sacrificing too much because like, what else are you doing with your value play? You're just kind of praying that you get some other guy in there like Arcidiacono who scores, maybe 15 fantasy points or something like that. It's hard to find cheap guys to like. So I still think that going over to the field on Thad Young makes sense.
All right, let's see. I'm getting a hockey notification, but our boy Jake Hari killing it on the hockey game as always, making sure everybody's aware of news. So if you're trying to play another sport in addition to the fun-filled NBA with all its late news this year, check it out NHL with Jake Hari. Always a good move. Morgan asking thoughts on a direct pivot to Nwaba on DK from Thad Young. Nwaba projects fine to me, but I mean, yeah, I can't hate it. I know I have a good portion of my lineups that are just value plays that aren't going to be Brunson and Thad Young. So if you could really talk me into anybody there, but relative to these guys, I think Nwaba has a decent shot at being useful, especially with no Sterling Brown in the mix, but I don't have a strong feel. Greg, do you feel anything in your heart for David Nwaba?
Yeah, but it's nothing but venom. So David Nwaba, like even last game when they didn't have Oladipo, they didn't have Eric Gordon, Nwaba didn't play a significant role. He ended up coming off the bench. He was behind McLemore in the rotation. He was behind Jayshawn Tate in the rotation. So to me now also that we're adding Victor Oladipo and Eric Gordon in the mix, there's too many guys that are ahead of him. So it's hard for me to see Nwaba having a decent game, especially when you consider that he's not a good per minute fantasy producer.
Yeah, I mean, again, like I talked about earlier with the matchup against Chicago, I still feel like I'm willing to take some stabs on these guys. Normally not a big PJ Tucker fan, but even he made it into some lineups for me today. But Nwaba, I really think, it's just more of a, hey, you're putting him in because you think that there's some chance that your other value plays don't go right. And I don't have the highest expectations for him, but that said, play a little bit, but I think we clearly have now established, I think that Brunson and Thad Young are the value plays that you should be a little more comfortable with overall. Let's see, going back to the Slack here. Nothing else good. Greg, anything you're getting in your crunches that are worthwhile? I just feel like for me, it's worth pointing out. I ended up with 40% Harden, 40% Giannis, and 40% Kevin Durant, not stacked in any way, but obviously they're going to end up a lot together. That's the one, I guess, interesting observation I have, but anything you're seeing here in your final crunches that you want to bring to the folks?
Draymond Green is somebody who I like a lot for this slate that I think is going a little bit overlooked. I know he's getting some ownership, but I think he should be a lot more popular. We just look at the price point on Draymond Green being a guy who's in the low to mid 5K range on both FanDuel and DraftKings. I mean, Draymond Green, unless we think he's just totally washed, he has to be more expensive than this going forward. Did you have any stance on Draymond Green? He's one of the players I'm more overweight to the field on.
I got him definitely more than I thought I would. I think, let me just pull up my exposures real fast, but yeah, I've got him at 25% tonight just because the center position, I think, again, if you're not going to Christian Wood, if you can't afford to put a Durant or a Giannis in that spot, I think Draymond's probably one of the better projected plays in this spot here. He's going to be projected for 23% ownership. So to me, I didn't get too much above. I think I have about, I have the 25%. So I don't want to go crazy with it by any stretch, but relative to a weak slate and a slate really lacking in value, like he's one guy that projects for over 5X for me. And I feel like that's probably enough to get him some exposure on this slate.
Okay. Yeah. I like Draymond a lot. The other thing too is I just had somebody else I wanted to bring up. I'm getting to Garrett Temple now that we have all those other guys. That's more of a FanDuel specific play. He's a little bit more expensive on DraftKings. On FanDuel, Garrett Temple is nearly min price. He's 3,800. So that kind of salary I think makes him worthwhile. especially with no Patrick Williams, no Otto Porter. We haven't seen a starting lineup for the Bulls yet, have we?
I don't believe so, no, unless it's come through at some point.
Okay, so that's something I'm going to be interested to see.
We got the Rockets, though, for whatever that's worth. I don't think we mentioned it on the show, but maybe part of why Nwaba may be more interesting to some people. But Oladipo, Gordon, Nwaba, Tucker, and Wood is the Rockets starting lineup, so that came through.
Yeah, I still don't really have much love there for Nwaba. I still think like Nwaba, McLemore, Tate, all those guys are going to play some minutes, and I don't really think that any of them have a great chance to have a big fantasy game. I think that maybe one of them scores, like 20 fantasy points or something like that, but I don't see a real substantial ceiling there.
Yeah, I think I'm with you on that one. Let's see, I'm jumping back and forth here. Elroy Jenkins asking Luka and Durant or Lowry. Oh, wait, okay. Luka, Durant, and Lowry or Harden, LeBron, and Boucher for a DK GPP. I just don't like LeBron. I would take the first half of it, though. Harden, to me, is my favorite player, I think, out of all those groupings. But Greg, how about you with this three versus three? Luka, Durant, and Lowry, Lowry Markkanen, or Harden, LeBron, and Chris Boucher?
I really do like Boucher a lot, so I'm going to go the combination there with him. I don't really like Lauri Markkanen all that much on DraftKings. By the way, like, what kind of value plays do you have in there? Just no salary cap in whatever games you're playing, just paying up for everybody. Just like, hey, here's 6 of the most expensive players on the slate. But yeah, since I don't really like Lauri Markkanen all that much on DraftKings, I'll say the lineup without him.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. And I don't really, I assume you must just be taking like Thad and some other, all the cheap guys put together in one lineup, which at that point, you might just take the more contrarian lineup with what you're looking at. Iron Maiden 2 asking any love for TLC on DK. I got a little bit just as a pivot to Thad Young, which I was already getting anyway. I think the issue with Luwawu-Cabarrot is A, the minutes I think are still going to be pretty fluid, and B, the usage rates for him, I think anywhere you put him at are probably a little high for what he's going to get with what we've seen, at least thus far, from Harden and Durant. Maybe Milwaukee changes that a little bit, but I got some Luwawu-Cabarrot, not an appreciable amount. Greg, how are you feeling about TLC here in a spot where he is cheap, but maybe questionable ceiling?
Yeah, I'm in the same spot as you. And the funny thing about him also is I have him projected for about 17 and a half fantasy points and playing 24 minutes. And even then that makes him come up in some lineups just because value is so scarce on this slate and there's so many guys to pay up for. That yeah, even with him having a relatively crappy game on a points per minute basis, he's still somebody that ends up popping up in like 10% of lineups.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely don't love the play. I feel like that's one of the plays that I don't feel very confident in. And I sort of just capped a lot of these cheap guys that I don't have much confidence in at 5%. And Luwawu-Cabarrot is one of those guys that I was like, okay, if I get a little bit of them, that's fine. Anything more than that, not trying to get there. Alart in the YouTube chat asking last two in, Oladipo and Young or DiVincenzo and Porzingis for FanDuel GPP. Greg, how would you lean there? I think we have 2 chalkier options, 2 less chalky options. So how do you want to go?
So Oladipo and Porzingis was one combination. What was the other?
Oladipo and Thad or DiVincenzo and Porzingis?
I slightly prefer DiVincenzo and Porzingis. I got to DiVincenzo a decent amount. Porzingis is a really tough one for me because he is projected to be the highest owned power forward play on FanDuel, and his price is way down. So here's the difference, Spags. He's 6,900 on FanDuel as opposed to his DK price where he's a lot more expensive. And also with the defensive stats, he's always been somebody who scores better on FanDuel than he does on DraftKings. I tried to nerf Porzingis' minutes as much as I could to try to account for the risk of him playing on the tail end of a back-to-back. Keep in mind, I thought there was no chance that he was going to play this morning. I was wrong. He's obviously playing now. And even with me giving him 28 minutes on this slate, he still came out as the best points per dollar play at the power forward position. So it was really hard for me to get away from Porzingis just because of what his price is at. I fully have no confidence in him. And if he plays like 22 minutes today, then I can't say that's unexpected. The first time he's played a back-to-back in a very long time. But the price at 6,900 made it very difficult for me to get away from Porzingis. So long story short, Porzingis and Dante DiVincenzo is the answer.
Yeah, Porzingis on DK, I feel like I don't have the confidence he's going to play the 33 minutes that he played yesterday. And I think to me at his price point on DK that I get the difference. So it does seem like he'd be a little more viable on FanDuel or substantially more viable on FanDuel, but on DraftKings, I feel like that's just, if you're playing 150, you get some exposure. I think that's probably fine. But besides that, I wouldn't want to go there much. Let's see. Any other good questions here? No super chats. Are you getting any Warriors besides Draymond, by the way? I feel like we didn't talk about Steph Curry, which is always a sure tell sign that Steph Curry is going to have a monster day and somehow single-handedly keep the Warriors in this game against the Lakers. But I didn't get there much. I did get some Wiggins for whatever that's worth. And we talked about Wiseman. I think Wiseman's somebody who should be in play, but Wiggins, I'm going to be 2x the field on Wiggins, which is never fun, but I do think I'm willing to get there just because of his price on DraftKings. What are you getting in terms of the other Warriors in this spot? A late night hammer potentially if they somehow stay in the game.
Draymond Green, James Wiseman on DraftKings. I have like 5% Damian Lee, I think was the number, and like 5% Kent Bazemore. Once again, not guys I'm actually wanting to make an investment in, just guys who it's like these guys pop up in X number of my lineups because there's a bunch of guys that on the high end that are expected to score a lot of points. There's a lack of value. The fantasy cruncher is going to try to put in some cheap guys into those lineups. Damian Lee and Kent Bazemore came out in some of them. Not guys that I go out of my way to recommend. Definitely not guys I want to go roster, but just guys who ended up making it in. But no, nobody I actually like.
Yeah, I think that seems about right. And I'm with you. I think Draymond really is the one that stands out a bit more, even though I think you can make the case for Wiggins, Draymond, and Wiseman too, honestly. Wiseman going to be decently owned, and I think those are both decent ownership numbers. Wiggins, any day he can go off, any day he can completely fail, and neither will shock me, and that's the joy of rostering Andrew Wiggins. Mr. Moneybags asking, need a super cheap small forward on a DK GPP. Thoughts on Bazemore? Would you suggest anyone else? Mr. Moneybags also gets the money sign. Of course, the cashier only rings if you have money in your name or some sort of garish attire. But Greg, are you getting anything at small forward that seems worthwhile? I feel like now that a one-do is out, I think there's really not much I would even point to. Garrett Temple, I guess.
Was this a FanDuel or DraftKings question?
This was a DK GPP question.
All right, so DK GPP, and then just read it back to me one more time, just so I know exactly what the question is here.
Thoughts on Bazemore or anybody else who would be a cheap small forward? I guess that would qualify there.
Jeff Green, I think, is peripherally viable. That's the guy who I said if you absolutely have to roster a cheap small forward, it would be Jeff Green for me. And I know Jordan's going to be excited about that because he was banging the Jeff Green drum on opening night of the NBA season.
Yeah, and it's worked out, I think, roughly 0 times, but one of these days, it's going to pan out pretty well. I think Garrett Temple at his price, I feel like is the one that jumps out to me enough to get there, but he's really not that cheap. So you're kind of just, you're wishing. Now that we don't have our dear Wesson One-Do available, it's going to be tough. And last question here, we are locked. So hopefully you guys got your lineups in and hopefully they are competent. But Iron Maiden asking LeBron and Boucher or Wood and Van Vliet. For that either or, Greg, who would you pick? Which is locked, by the way, so it doesn't even matter.
All right. So it was LeBron and Boucher or Wood and Van Vliet.
Yeah.
All right. LeBron and Boucher.
I'd go Wood and Van Vliet. I feel like Wood, I'm a little more confident. Van Vliet, always a fun tournament play. And it'll be all that comes down really as to who's running hot in that backcourt between him and Kyle Lowry. And that's it. We are locked. So make sure you guys subscribe, hit the notification bell. We have content coming up all the time here. Lots of shows, some new shows coming out, some new hours. I think we're debuting our first ever late slate live before lock coming up on Wednesday. So we got some fun stuff coming up. So make sure you guys are subscribed and paying attention to everything coming through. Greg, any plugs you want to hit on before we call it quits?
No, the only thing that really matters is which of us comes out ahead on that 2v2 that we entered after lock. That's what I think is really most important. We're going to be doing live before lock again tomorrow. We're going to have to come up with some really fun bits for tomorrow, Spags. So we only have 2 games to talk about because of COVID cancellation. So a lot of time for us to kill tomorrow. That's going to be fun. Yeah,
we're going to bring, Greg's going to do one of his old stand-up sets. I'll do one of mine, and we're going to I'll have to find a way to blur out all the profanities and disgusting references that we wouldn't be allowed here. But we appreciate you guys very much hanging out. Good luck tonight. Enjoy tonight's slate. And I don't know. I really don't even know. This basketball day has just been a nightmare. So hopefully tomorrow goes better in terms of news and organization. And we'll see you guys then. Good luck.